Welcome to the Visual Cast. Coming at you from California, I'm your host, Alon Hammer, aka Rem. The Visual Cast is a hybrid podcast where we sit down with some of the best, most interesting, and most exciting visual artists from all over the world. We chat about life, art, visuals, software, hardware, systems, crystals, alien downloads, spirituality, and catalysts. It's essentially a massive nerd out. But the guests also do a set where we dive into their computer and get an up-and-close look at how they make art, how they perform art, or really anything they want to share with us. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. To support us, please like and subscribe, follow us on Instagram, and leave us a review on Spotify. Now, without any further ado, here's the Visual Cast.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride.
Actually a first for the podcast, somebody who is not a traditional VJ, but a very unique and exciting artist nonetheless, and just a super rad and cool guy that does really super cool and rad things. So welcome to the podcast, Plexus Play, Matt Dibiase.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, my friend. It's nice to have you on. I think ever since we met in a dark club at a random event, I was super intrigued. I'm like, who's this guy? You know, people coming up to me, whatever. Check out my Instagram. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And then I was like, whoa, this is actually pretty sick. Like, I was really impressed by the stuff that you do. Yeah, I mean, I want to jump right into it. I like to start off with like a more scripted question and then get into a conversation. So let's start with there. So, Mr. Plexus, from Lightning in a Bottle and Beyond Wonderland to TEDx and America's Got Talent, you are all over the map of media, festivals, and technology. You have designed and produced one of the coolest and unique audiovisual shows to date and truly have a captivating and mind-bending show. Your ability to create, fabricate, and operate all the multifacets of your show on your own at such a high level is inspiring to say the least. So, to start us off, what is it like to build and wear an LED light suit, and what are some of the funniest reactions you have gotten from wearing it?
That's a really good question. What is it like to wear the light suit? I think when I perform, I really enter this like peak authenticity. Like it's this form of myself that I don't really feel like I get to unleash every day. So I really enter this state of flow in performing, and the light suit just seems to like enhance that in a way, because I really look at it as an augmentation of the music onto my body, and I love to just like move my body in coordination with a lot of the show cues for the audience and things like that. So it feels like an augmentation of the flow state that I'm already in, I guess. And it also feels just like the future. Definitely. I feel like I'm like straight, everyone's like Tron and commenting on all these like things in terms of the aesthetic look of it. It definitely is a project that pushes the envelope and comes with its challenges. And in that sense, it's like a lot of hard work to make it work. But it's very rewarding, and I am grateful for how already what I was doing, combining mallet percussion and visuals, was like no one else was really doing that. And so to have that third factor with the suit to sort of take everything to another tier of eccentric and eclecticness helps me stand out even more, I guess, in that sense. So it's a defining feature too. Yeah. Oh, I can't hear you now for some reason. Strange.
Oh, sorry. My bad. Can you hear me now? For those of us who don't know what we're talking about, look at this. I mean, this is just like, this is insanity. And all music made by Matt as well. He's clearly a very high-level musician. Being able to infuse his uniqueness into his music. But I don't know. The suit is just like, when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this guy is taking things to the next level. So yeah, I mean, like, what are some like funny reactions you've gotten from this? I mean, playing at festivals, people must be like so like, whoa, bro, what the fuck, bro? Whoa, it's going with the music, bro. What the fuck?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of the Wook festival scene is the term, I believe. It's definitely just
Yeah.
like absolutely mind blown. They're like, I was not expecting that at all. Yeah, someone came up to me after one show that just said, "You are the music," and I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm going for. Like,
I love that.
That is definitely what I'm going for.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
it's a
just
good
super
time.
cool. And then another fun fact, when I found out that you use TouchDesigner to do all this stuff, I was, again, like, I'm like, okay, you're just like a triple X. I don't know, that's not the right way to say it. You're like a, what's the word, like a triple factor, or like a, I can't remember the term, but like, you know, you hit all the things. You're like a musician, you're a designer, you're making visuals, and you're also like programming. Like, you know, this is just awesome.
Yeah.
Triple X is definitely not the right term for that. That means something else, I think.
There's a triple threat, maybe.
Triple threat.
Is that what you're looking for? Yeah.
I think
or like
so, I think so.
Renaissance man. I don't know.
You're
Some people have
Renaissance
deemed me many silly things in my time. It's really just a dude with a lot of time on his hands that's a nerd and likes to create a lot of stuff. So that's all it is.
Hey man, super nerds is where we are at this channel. That's definitely our favorite people to have on. You can't
Yeah,
get better than a super nerd with time on their hands. You know, that's just like, you can't get better than that. I love your, you know, you have some really awesome breakdowns on your Instagram. Definitely go check out Matt's Instagram. You know, where you can kind of like get a little bit more of understanding of like the timeline of everything. I thought that was really cool, because it's like kind of for a nerd like me, that's like really fun to see. For a nerd like me, that's fun to see. Being able to see like the breakdown, but also like a little bit of behind the scenes of how the sausage is made. It's like just very cool. You know, and then getting to see like this pixel map, that's also like, it's awesome that you provide that in some way. Like, it's just really cool to be able to see that. So yeah, I mean, it's like, it's super fascinating. I mean, this is like definitely a huge topic that I want to talk about, the suit. But before we get there, I'd love to learn a little bit about little Matt. Did you grow up in SoCal, or are you just living there now?
I grew up in a suburb of Boston called Wellesley, Massachusetts.
Ooh, interesting. That's like very different than where you're living now, I would imagine.
Sure, yeah, it's a much more sheltered place, I would say. But I am really grateful for where I grew up. I had amazing public schools and really great friends and parents and all that stuff when I grew up. So yeah.
Did you you're obviously, or not obviously, but I'm assuming that you're a musician first, right? You kind of got into this whole realm of creative flow through music. Is that right, or am I just making assumptions?
Yeah, I was always I grew up with two sisters, and I think I've always been more in touch with that like emotional, feminine, and expressive side of myself than the average male. I credit a lot of my emotional intelligence and like willingness to be courageous as an artist to them, I would say.
Hell yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I started with music when I was 6 or 7. I actually just really lucked out and found my cousin was doing my aunt told my mom about this really good percussion teacher in a neighboring town, and I just like leaned pretty heavily into that as a kid. I started when I was in kindergarten, just playing these like tiny marimbas with my mouth above my head and stuff. And I started when I was 6, 7, and just, it was a hobby, because where I was raised, all my friends were going to med school, going to, financial advisor, doctor, lawyer, all that stuff. They were all on the tracks to do that. And I didn't really seriously consider pursuing music until I got into Oberlin, which is where I really like, a lot of my friends were like, that's a major conservatory there. Like, you should really take this more seriously.
Is that like in high school, or is that after high school?
That's after high school. Oberlin College
After
Conservatory was like where I studied for college. But in high school, it was just crazy starting at 7 years old and going through it's a hobby for like 12 years. I studied with this woman who's really good. And by the time I got spat out, I was in an ensemble of 5 mallet people that were just everyone was an absolute shredder. And so we'd take turns accompanying. One person would play the xylophone in the center, and 4 people would play marimbas of different ranges, where you play the bass part
So
or the
cool.
tenor parts, or yeah.
So wow, that's so interesting. So you always kind of were leaning towards kind of percussion as a hobby, like with a really good teacher growing up. Were your parents like pushing you? Was there anybody in your life that was like inspiring you to kind of like follow this as like a hobby? I mean, obviously getting into that school was probably like the catalyst of like, okay, I'm like a pro. I should take this like seriously. But even as a hobby, as like a kid, it's always kind of hard to like follow things through, like how many of us have had piano lessons as a kid and never did anything with it,
Totally.
So
I mean, I
was
was
there
that kid too. I was teaching music for a decent amount out of school just to pay some bills. And I remember like complaining to my parents that like no one ever practices and takes it seriously. And they were like, you did that as a kid. Like you can't attribute that. And it was totally valid. And I agree that conservatory is a very special place where you have nothing but time to really work on your craft and have a really good rapport with the professor and all that stuff. And granted, I was at a university studying the sciences and studying music, so I was very busy in school. I like to say that I'm doing all my partying now at festivals that I didn't do in college.
Nice.
But yeah, it was I feel very lucky to have gone to school where I went, and I also just like music was always very big passion of mine. But I wouldn't say I was like always diligent with my practice regimen, and I didn't really take that more seriously until I was challenged in an ensemble setting in high school. I played in jazz band in high school. I picked up the drums in middle school. That's like a big part of four-limb coordination, all that stuff in relation to the show and the suit and all that stuff. Drumming was a really big part of that for me in terms of production and overall musicality. So that was more middle school, high school, and then conservatory was where it was like full on mallets. And
Were
theory
you
and
were you
jazz.
surprised when you got into the conservatory? Was it kind of like a validation, mixed motion kind of thing?
I actually had a surgery for overuse injury from tennis, for mallet
Oh,
playing, and drumming in my
no,
senior year
on
of high
your-
school. Did not
on
do
your hand?
any auditions on my elbow.
Oh,
Took me
shit.
out for like the whole first half of my senior year, no auditions for any music schools.
Oh,
And I actually
wow.
got into Oberlin just as a college student in the liberal arts college. And then my first year, at the end of the year, I auditioned for the conservatory and got into the jazz department. Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow, interesting. So you just were not giving up. You're like, this is something that I want to do. It was kind
Yeah.
of like you wanted to do it.
Yeah, I wanted to go to. I was either looking at Oberlin or the Rochester Eastman partnership, Eastman School of Music with Rochester University in New York, and those were my two top choices because I knew I wanted to go someplace where music was done at a very high level, but I could also have a great other degree.
Like a more
have a-
education kind of thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's so cool. So you studied your degree is in science as well?
Yeah, I have a bachelor's in neuroscience and a
Oh, wow.
bachelor's in jazz performance.
Right. I saw something about that with a Harvard publication, which I actually have noted for later on. I'd love to
Yeah.
talk about that as well at some point.
Yeah.
So neuroscience and a bachelor's in music. Wow, that's amazing. You're so
Yeah.
cool.
I'm a
Yeah, I mean
lucky
you're like
kid, man.
you're like a super nerd. You're not just like a normal nerd, dude. You're like a
Yeah,
super
yeah.
nerd.
An interdisciplinary super nerd, I guess. Yeah.
Interdisciplinary super nerd with a light suit.
Mm-hmm.
Damn, you're making all of us other nerds look lame, bro. What the hell? um, super cool. Okay, so you're kind of getting more and more, I guess, professional in your craft. You're becoming like really, really, high level at your music. What kind of made you shift into electronic music, into Ableton, and then, the vibraphone, if I'm saying it right, is that's kind of
Yeah.
like a more electronic version of a xylophone, right? It's like kind of like a MIDI controller almost, I guess, in some way.
Totally. In some ways, it's a fully analog instrument. But
Okay.
or what was your first question? Sorry.
Like getting into Ableton and like just kind of digitizing
Right.
your
Classical
world of
training.
music.
Yeah. Yeah. That really started in college. Believe it or not, I did have my like guilty pleasure in college was not really going out and partying. It was like, I mean, I did do that for sure. I socialized, but I was doing this dual degree life, which was a very dense schedule of like instrumental music in ensembles and all that and private lessons, and then the neuroscience stuff with labs and everything. And I get to the end of the day on like Fridays and Saturdays, and I'd spend a couple hours just tinkering in Ableton before I went out and hung out with friends. And that was always something I really, really loved. There were a lot of nights where the security guard at Oberlin would come around like 12 or 1, and I learned to hide in the right like 15-minute interval, depending on the guard, under a beanbag in my practice room. I would just like climb under the beanbag for 15 minutes on my phone and then get back out and keep working late because they would kick you out. There was one guard named George though. He was the man. He was like, he'd come by and just be like, "All right, man," and then just not kick me out. Just like, thank you, George.
So funny.
Anyways, so yeah, it was always a guilty pleasure, and I think those days, now that I work more full time on my project, those days of like feeling like you're fighting against something, you have to really set up those challenges for yourself in a much more intentional way when you're full time as an artist, and that's been a good challenge to structure those challenges. So, yeah. But in terms of digitizing the vibraphone, I actually ended up getting individual piezo contact pickup microphones on every bar. There's 37 of them on my instrument, and it runs out like a 1/4 inch, like a guitar. They just aggregate, so I can feed it through a pedal board or whatever. That digitizes the analog instrument. And then the MIDI one that I have is just, it's a bunch of MIDI pads. I'm like an artist with a company that has a MIDI mallet instrument.
So, wow.
One other thing.
Interesting.
There too is with a keyboard, you have pitch bending and mod wheel like this.
Like the little thing on the side.
Yeah, these guys. This enables you to have more vocal expression. So like this would often be linked to vibrato. Like you turn this wheel up and you get versus, and then this is just like a pitch bend. If you don't have these and you're playing a digital mallet instrument, you're basically just a lame keyboardist that doesn't have expression. So I was like, how do I give this vocal expression quality? I ended up like finding this pressure sensitive MIDI controller, which is called the Soft Step. You might have heard of this. And then I 3D printed this piece of plastic to sit over the top from my college 3D print club. My friend helped me with this. So I made this in Tinkercad, just like super jank. But then this houses the sustain pedal. It's like Velcro here. So the sustain pedal, this is normally faced this way actually. But the sustain pedal goes on the top of this, and then there's a semicircle on the bottom, so you can do sustain, like pitch bend on the middle pad, vibrato and modulation on the middle, and then leaning left and leaning right to these other two pads is pitch bend up, pitch bend down.
That's awesome. So you get like some sort of like play with it, or you have some give with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you needed that expressiveness, so yeah.
That's awesome. I love how music is different in that sense with like that expressiveness. I wonder like, yeah, I mean, I kind of relate to it in like the way it's super different, but like the difference between like pushing a button on like an OSC like touch controller or something versus like moving a knob or like playing with a slider, like that kind of physical tactile feedback where you're getting like you can actually like dance with it instead of just like moving it. I don't know, it's a little bit different because there is some sort of expression in like translating what you're hearing into your turns and knobs and stuff like that versus like just pushing a button or something. But obviously very different when you're talking about like pitch and stuff like that. So just one second about the vibraphone. I want to understand a little bit more. So it's a acoustic device that is just digitized. So it's like an acoustic guitar with like a pickup.
It's a standard analog vibraphone is just metal. It's aluminum bars, and they're connected on strings that run through the nodes of the vibration in the bars. So you can still have a lot of resonance in the center of the bar, but it's basically just black notes, white notes, and they're the only thing that makes it electric is actually a motor at the end of the instrument that turns and links to two dowels that sit below the resonators that amplify the sound. And there's these little discs, and the discs rotate above the resonator, and they either project the sound further out the resonator so it's louder, or they mute it when it's flat. And so it creates a natural vibrato. That's where the whole term vibraphone comes from. So instead of just a pure note like boo, you get boo, 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 boo. And you can speed up the motor.
Oh,
you can get all different types of effects. Yeah.
Interesting. That's so cool. So it's really just like it's basically the same thing as a xylophone, just with that added vibration aspect to it.
Yes, and the main difference is the sustain pedal. You actually have a sustain pedal with a felt linked to spring under all the aluminum bars. That's
of
how you
the
dampen, like, a piano.
circle of the circle thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, the circle thing's
No,
just to
that's
create, like, so there's
that.
resonator tubes
Okay.
that sit below every note, and that amplifies it like a pipe organ almost.
Oh,
And then
okay.
the
Okay. That's
discs
not.
sit above the
Xylophones don't
resonators.
have that. Xylophones don't have that.
No, xylophones have resonators too.
They do.
But they don't have the turning flap above the resonator that gives it vibrato because they don't have
Okay.
sustain.
Okay.
So the sustain enables you to add vibrato, and then the motor
So
controls the speed
crazy.
of the vibrato.
Like just like a little thing
Yeah.
like that can change an instrument like
Completely, yeah,
completely, right? Like it's so crazy.
yeah.
I love that. Super cool. Okay, so that's interesting. So you kind of were just naturally getting into Ableton, like just out of curiosity.
A
were
big
you
part of
like,
it was I was writing for an 8-piece band, and I wanted to arrange music and have demos and like, give them a sense of vision before we walked into rehearsal. And so that was my main first draw to it. I mean, I always was on SoundCloud loving EDM when I was in college and like
Right,
getting really into
right.
the sounds. But it was practically I learned to use it because it had the use of getting ideas out of my head as a composer and like
just easy,
manifesting them
fast,
with
just getting it
friends.
out of your head?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's such a good, like almost like a pre-visualization, but with audio, right? Like you're getting like
Totally.
a demo of it.
And
That's
as my
super
musicality
useful.
was developing, you know, I'm not Mozart waking up with a whole orchestration in my brain that I just spew out on a paper and then I'm a genius. You know, like that's not me. So, and as I was developing my ear in school, my sense of arranging and learning all these things, you know, having the ability to just stack layers and offload that off your brain, so you're
Right.
not like thinking about everything
Thinking
at the
about it.
piano while you're doing it.
And
is
you can
really
get it.
important, I think,
You
when
can listen to it back, right, and get like some
Yeah.
sort of feedback from it.
Exactly.
Super cool. Okay, so you kind of were familiar with EDM at this point, like when you're playing with Ableton, and your school was classic or jazz?
My Oberlin is known as a classical conservatory, but it had a jazz department of like 80,
Okay.
85 kids that I was in.
Okay.
It's like a family.
So you were in the jazz department?
I was in the jazz department.
Got you. Okay, that's at least okay. So you're not like a full nerd, like you at least a little bit.
Yeah. I have, I can improvise.
You're
Like, I can say I'm like so grateful, especially going to festivals and a lot of different scenes where everyone just considers you a magician if you can walk up and just start playing with a song, which is just like intuitively what I was brute force
Right.
trained to do, like instantly.
Right.
And
Right.
that's just,
And you're
a
like, this is
superpower
easy.
that-
Yeah.
yeah, like everyone's like, how did you, what? And I was like, dude, it's just, that's
Do
what I
you-
did for like 4
Like
years.
this is like a super anecdotal thing, but like if you would have studied classic, would you have the same ability to do that, or is that something that like very specific to like jazz training in terms of just like picking things up very easily?
I'll say that jazz, they hadn't homogenized the curriculums at my conservatory, so I actually had to take all the classical ear training and all the jazz ear training. But I
interesting.
placed out of some of the jazz ear training. Jazz musicians, this was funny. Jazz musicians were always better than like the opera singers at the ear training
At
exercises
picking it
in
up.
classical settings. Yeah. It was just like we sing stuff back, we identify it much easier because we're not focused on singing things in 5 different languages for concerts and stuff. You know, there's like different specialties that you need as a vocalist. But it was funny to see how, jazz musicians, I think, generally have a leg up on the need for just instant call and response. Like, it
Right.
creates a different type of demand.
Right, like
to
classic, they're just
internalize.
kind of they're better at reading sheet music or following some sort of direction of some sort, right? Like
Execution and interpretation
Execution
is usually
and
the words
execution and interpretation. I
Stylistic
like that.
interpretation is important in classical music. That's like what makes you in the music. You don't have your own
Right.
vocabulary that
like
you're
your
putting into it, like in a
emotional
jazz song.
input into it.
Yeah, those decisions are much more heavily considered than.
And in jazz, it's not necessarily like that.
No, in jazz, it's even more. I'd say it's like exaggerated. Someone like I've been on
More
a gig where
exaggerated.
someone just showed up to the gig and is like, "Dude, I'm pissed today," and I'm like, "Cool, let's play all this music like pissed. I'm down." Like just kind of a cathartic set. Sure.
Yeah.
It's cool to be able to do that on jazz gigs, which you can't really do when you're rolling up to the opera gig.
For
but-
sure.
Yeah,
unless the opera calls for you to be like
True.
sad or upset, right? The character needs to
Totally,
be
and
sad
then
or
you can
upset.
channel that. Yeah. But there's a bit more freedom.
Super cool. Yeah, and I'm sure that like, or I'm assuming, again, I'm making a lot of assumptions because I'm not a really musical person. I love music, but I would never, and I was one of those kids that like was forced to go study piano, and I did it for like 4 years, but now I can't do anything with piano. And being a massive nerd as well, I did pick up like Fruity Loops when it came out, because it was like kind of came out around the same time that I was like playing with computers. and I played with it for like 20 minutes and then got bored, and I was like, never again. But there was one thing that I picked up. It was the Chaosilator, which is like the
Oh yeah.
it was an iPhone app back in the day. Like it wasn't, I didn't have the actual device, but they had an iPhone app that kind of worked the same way. And I wrote like a bunch of songs in the Chaosilator. It's all lost now, but that was the only musical expression that I could actually call back to. But it was so much fun because it was like, it had like everything was kind of kept in beat, and you can kind of layer things in a different way, but you had the pitch and shift, and you can kind of play with it in a really fun way. But yeah, I mean, it's always one of those things, that I wish I would have picked up. I probably could pick up Ableton if I really got into it. It's probably intuitive enough for me to do it,
Dude,
but
if
it's
you're
like
streaming 3 sources and mixing all that right now with this on this call, you can definitely do Ableton. Ableton's
I know, but it's like the mindset of like what music is. I feel like I'm so disconnected. Like I intuitively know what sounds good to me, right? Like I know, and especially like from listening to so much psytrance and like being involved in so much music, and also doing visuals, like I can intuitively understand like a beat and like a time signature, but to like convert that into like actually writing something, I feel like I would have a big step, because like intuitively picking it up is very different than like sitting down and like writing it. I don't know, maybe I'm just
No, I think you're getting at what I like to describe as like top-down versus bottom-up approaches to writing music when I talk with students about it and we do composition. It's like I often write some of my best music when I'm in a really strong emotional state, and I break that down into how I want to tell the story, and then how that thus reflects in the harmony and the melody and the beat and all that. Versus I'm messing around with this crazy sound design idea that I saw on Instagram 2 hours ago and just like made a sick 8-bar loop. And then I'm like, what the hell is this about? I don't know.
What else can it do? Right.
Yeah. So there's like 2 different approaches there that you're getting at, but both have a certain amount of music always has this intangibility where it's like, it's not a tactile thing. And it has this mysticism because of that, especially in the creative process, I find. Probably similar with visuals too. I mean,
Totally.
I feel the same way.
It's definitely similar. I think the difference would be, and this is like everybody has their own approach to visuals, but like my difference would be when it comes to visuals, it's like it's one thing to like see something and then create it versus like, okay, I have an emotional response to something and I want to express it visually. You know what I mean? Like that's gonna, for me, it's like the times that I could relate to that is like, okay, I had somebody very close to me pass away, and then, but I've had this idea of like a visual, something that I wanted to express visually. Like it was angels, right? Angels flying up, right? And then because this person passed away, then I had the want or like the inspiration, and for lack of a better word, to like go and do that thing that I had seen previously. You know what I mean? And then the emotional state kind of projected out into something that I already had an idea for. But yeah, it's a little bit different because you can't just pick up an instrument and play. I guess you could like start mixing visuals, but I don't know. That's not really like my vibe of things. And then like if I would just get into a node graph and start playing with nodes, you could maybe like find some sort of expression there. But I feel like it's not as intuitive as just like strumming a guitar or playing on keys. And this is like I'm sure somebody disagrees with me. And please, if you do, comment. But yeah, I think it's like there's something there with visuals. I think there is something disconnected from like the full-on momentary expression. That maybe like a painter, right, or somebody who's like maybe drawing or something could maybe have more direct connection to it. But I don't have that as well. And I'm actually interested. I'm trying to get this a friend of mine. It's been a very bit difficult to get on the show, but he's a modeler, a 3D model. Shout out Zane Rogers, amazing 3D modeler, like ZBrush legend. He has like a Patreon. He releases all his models to like print. Super cool guy, and like his stuff is like so visceral, and like a lot of like masks and like little model like figurines. And I always wonder if he's like, he's obviously like in a super flow when he's modeling, but like I wonder if there's like an expression added to it. There must be. Like if he's like pissed off one day or happy one day, it's got to be.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's cool to hear you say that. It feels very like passionate and your emotions are felt when looking at his 3D work. Because oftentimes for me, and this is, I heard this from someone and I can't really get it out of my head, that like 2D animation feels like it has more soul than 3D animation.
Interesting.
Which, you know, when you look at all the like classic Disney 2D things versus the classic
yeah.
Disney 3D things, you're like, damn, there is like this unspoken character behind 2D animation that is really cool. But I mean 3D's progressed miles since I think that's
I would like, just out of the cuff, I would agree with you, just because there's like such a painterly like artistry kind of in the 2D. But
Right.
that being said, I mean, you know, there's some killer 3D stuff that's so emotional. Like, I think where the line is like, you know, you can make 3D look super filmic, and then you could start using like the language of like film with like, you know, a character, emotion, lighting, camera angles, you know, perspective, and then you can start getting back into like an emotional kind of response. But then again, it's a different, you're kind of manipulating the emotional response with this language of film, right? Because like film is, a lot of it is manipulating the viewer. Not necessarily manipulating in a bad way, but manipulating them with like forced perspective, or like lighting is going to trigger a response. Color is going to trigger a response. Characters' emotions are going to trigger a response. Whereas like 2D animation, you're kind of just like, look at this broad stroke, or like, you know, the way that I was just watching Jungle Book with my boy, you know, and it's like,
Nice.
it's so janky, but it's like so beautiful. Like, you know, like just seeing the animals, the way the animals move naturally, but then you're like, wait, this is like 12 frames per second, but like for some reason it looks so good. It's just like super crazy to me to like have that response to something that is in like equivocally cheap, right? But it's like not. I don't know. There's something so weird about it, like the way that it makes you feel. You know, it's like really crazy.
There's definitely, I mean, just in terms of how the workflow works, there's more humans behind those old movies that were doing all the in-between frames and the keyframes, you know, like, versus now you're putting keyframes into software, and it just, I think inherently you lose on those in-betweens of an animation. You're just not experiencing those human touches, the subtleties.
It's like reminding me of like claymation. Whenever you see like stop motion or claymation stuff, you're just like instantly like, oh, this is great. Even if it's like not, you're just instantly like, somebody move that thing every frame, you know?
Yeah. That's the true visual artist perspective. Like, this is sweat and tears behind this, so I'm loving it.
For sure. All right, well, we are getting into more of a visual conversation here. So as you're kind of progressing into your EDM, I guess, expression, or maybe getting more into electronic music, what was kind of and I love the catalyst, what was the catalyst of getting into visuals and learning TouchDesigner, learning Unreal, kind of getting into this kind of place? And where did you find TouchDesigner? What was the inspiration for that?
Yeah, I had, well, not to sound cliche, but COVID was. I already didn't have a ton of gigs as vibraphonist. You know, we're few and far between. No one knows that they want it, and then they hear it and they go, "What is that? I need that. I'm gonna hire that person." You know, but no one knows what it is. So
that's funny.
You don't get. I got called strictly on talent. My instrument is not a functional instrument. It's not bass. It's not drums. People write music. They're like, this needs vocals. This needs bass, drums. You know, I need a band. I was hired strictly on just like, this guy's a good musician. He knows how to read music, knows how to take a good solo, like compelling artist kind of thing. That was the only way I got hired for stuff as a freelance jazz vibraphonist. So yeah, it's pretty hard to make a living doing that. And I think all vibraphonists are very eclectic, very talented people in many different domains. Like, it's unavoidable if you play full time, or not full time, but if you pursue that instrument professionally, you end up just picking up a lot of other skills. And so I started visuals just in Premiere, wanting to learn how to tile videos, make music videos in college. And then when COVID hit, after I was out of college for a couple years, that's when I was just like, I already had very limited gigs. Now I definitely have no gigs. So it's time to just like get a new skill entirely. And I started with cinema, honestly, Cinema 4D. I wasn't messing around. I just like went straight for the belly of the beast. And I was doing like 8-hour renders overnight, waking up, oh, I forgot to turn that on, damn it, I gotta just do this all over again. So it was sort of a love-hate relationship with cinema. And I loved the stuff that I made in it, and I loved modeling. When I first discovered it, I modeled a really nice vibraphone. That was the first thing I did in cinema. But yeah, gradually, once I found Touch, a friend of mine who works more in like the startup world mentioned it to me, and then I looked into it and I saw that it had an interface with Ableton, and I was like, oh, this is, and I can watch the video real time as I'm making it. Like, that's it. It was over for me at that point. I was like, hard pivot into this because I'm just trying to make shows and I'm not trying to wait all night. Granted, I love the way cinema looked, and I even got Octane, like render engine and stuff at one point. But yeah, now I mostly work in Touch, and Touch also like sort of lent me to getting into the suit stuff and the TEDx show and like doing more web-based interesting things. But it's always been in servitude of my music and my show. That's one thing I'll say about my visual artistry is like I have a very strong vision musically, and then the visuals come after that. Yeah.
So it's kind of like you really wanted to have your own like one-man show kind of thing, and you're like, what do I need for this? Visuals is something that I need. Are you like, you're very but it's interesting because I was gonna say you're like a very one-man show, but at the same time you play in bands and you're like very clearly like, you know, understand the importance of like having like that whole aspect. Like why, what pushed you or what made you want to do it yourself, the visuals aspect of it? Like why not hire somebody or collaborate with somebody?
Yeah, really good question. I think it was, and that is to say, hit me up if you want to do any visual collaborations, because I will say, like, I'm really, I think in the next year, I'd really like to pivot towards just really regular music releases. That's something I haven't ever, like, hit a full stride with. And I'm really turning most of my focus towards that, I think, in 2025. But part of it was I was in an 8-piece band in college and a 4-piece band. And the 8-piece band played together for, like, 3-4 years, did some touring. The 10-piece band was, like, me and my closest friends. We went around the world with residencies and other things. Like we went to Chennai, India, the Netherlands, Amsterdam, Jordan in the Middle East. Like we did a lot of really cool stuff with that band. But ultimately, everyone wanted to do different things. I was actually the person who knew how to mix our stuff that we recorded, knew how to edit the videos that we recorded, and I sort of was like putting in all this effort there. And granted, like the band members were providing certain things, but I did feel like I was getting us more opportunities and doing more of the heavy lifting on all the production. And as I saw us going more and more into different directions with what we wanted to do career-wise, we sat down and we had an honest conversation about it all. And you know, they didn't want to wear skin-tight LED suits, so I was like, the choice is obvious. No, but it was just different directions. So, you know, in that sense,
like, guys, I got a great idea.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was pretty funny because I edited. Well, I'll talk about the artist that really inspired a lot of my project early on too. But I was editing content to sort of look more like this artist that was more like, didn't take themselves too seriously, didn't want to come off as this like posh artist, kind of just was like, I'm a great musician and I know it, and I'm just going to make fun videos and not really care about the seriousness of my project, because my playing speaks for the seriousness. It's like unavoidably commenting on the fact that I have spent a lot of time doing this and I'm serious about it. But yeah, my peers wanted to remain more in the like artsy academia presentation, and that's fine. That's what they wanted to do. So it was funny because at one point we got feedback from someone who was on the label that we were looking at, and they were like, yeah, can you make videos more like this guy? And I was like, that's the guy that I literally like, take a lot of inspiration from. And,
that's so funny.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, the big thing that got me into doing a lot of things myself was this group called Knower, Knower. They are not as active right now. Lewis Cole is a drummer who was in that duo, and Lewis Cole is very active now. But Knower is still releasing music occasionally, but that is a duo of Genevieve Artadi and Lewis Cole, and they were like USC jazz students who just like went to Joanne Fabrics with their mom and built a PVC outline for a projector backdrop in their garage and just like DIY'd it hardcore and made all their stuff in cinema. And I saw this. They came. I used to run a student organization at Oberlin that brought jazz musicians to perform, and we paid them, and they were like, oh yeah, dude, yeah, these guys.
This is like
they're so bomb.
This is old though, yeah. This is like a few years old.
Yeah, this is like 2, maybe 3 years old. Yeah, this that's funny. This is just like white squares, but they normally have a lot of really interesting visuals with their show.
But I mean, you could see like the DIY of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
you can see like the bodies and the
it's
FBX data and stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
So silly, like simple visuals like that, but very stimulating, very high energy. Really inspired my show.
Interesting. And they have you had an interaction with them at all?
Yeah, so I think the main moment where I was really impressed by them was we brought a handful of artists throughout the semester to Oberlin, but and a lot of them would get off the plane, they'd be like, "Where's my coffee?" Blah blah blah, like, and they kind of take advantage of the students because they're all jaded on the New York jazz scene and they know they're getting paid well and they know the students respect them.
Right.
So they'd kind of take advantage of that, and it felt really shitty. Honestly, it was kind of annoying. It's like, dude, you're getting paid well. We have like the best bass collection in Central America at our school. Like, there's no way these basses are not sufficient for you, but you're whining about them for some reason. And like, yeah, just dealing with politics was just something I really hated. And then these guys showed up at the end of the year. We didn't have a lot of budget, and I called them on the phone. I was like, hey, we don't have the budget that we normally get this nice hotel. They're like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Can we stay with the student? Can we stay with you? And I was like, sure. Yeah,
That's
stay at my
awesome.
apartment. I'll cook you whatever you need. Like, let me know what you want for food.
I love that.
And they were so chill about it.
Instantly,
No
like,
complaints.
down to earth, right? Like,
Yeah, and then they're backstage in this tiny ass closet that we had them in for a green room, and they're writing lyrics custom to the fact that the Cavs just won, like LeBron had just won the title for the Cavs, and they were like, Game 7 was like a build-up. Game 7, they were like designing the show
awesome.
right
That's
then and there
awesome.
before going on stage. And I was like, this is
love
it. People who don't complain, they're insanely creative, they work their asses off to like make a really cool audiovisual show, and they're just badass musicians. Like, first and
dynamic.
foremost.
They can change
So-
things at on the
Exactly.
go, kind of thing.
It
I
was
love
like
that.
that was a moment where I was like, these are the types of people that I really like to aspire
That's
to be
so
like
cool.
as an
That's so
artist.
cool.
So yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, that kind of like makes a lot of sense, right? Because you're like, okay, well, if I do it myself and I have control over everything, or at least I'm designing everything myself, then I can be more in the moment. I could be more dynamic, and I can also like have the full circle expression of what I'm doing, kind of like all at once, which I think your show really speaks for.
Thanks.
Cool. So, TouchDesigner, you got introduced by your friend, and then, okay. So now we got to get to like the cream in the room. Or I'm using really weird terms today. I don't
The
know.
elephant
a little
in the
bit.
room. The cream in the room.
The cream in the room. The elephant in the room. The suit. What inspired the suit? And give us a little bit of a run through of how that works. So we're gonna jump into it more in your set, but just
Sure.
tell us how it works and why.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to. I'd been performing, as you just saw in that video of Knower. They cast the visuals onto them, and I used to do my show just in a white suit, and I still do that when there's not budget for the light suit, but I just have a white cloth suit with like my branding and logos on it and stuff. And I used to just perform and cast the visuals directly onto my bodysuit and into the vibraphone, and it would look cool. It would just look like I was in the visuals. But I really wanted to have. I started doing like interactivity with the projections, where I like go up. There's like this Bob Ross thing that I do, where I go up and I hit the projections, and my mallets are like painting like color strokes
Hell yeah.
all over the visuals. So
Hell
I
yeah.
started doing things like that, and I was just like, well, like what would be the extension of this? And then it's like, well, like what if I could put the video footage on my body somehow and map the video on my body? And then I ended up asking some people in the TouchDesigner scenes. I got pointed to a few different people, and this guy, I ended up calling his name Sun and Moon Couture. He's on Instagram. He's great LED designer, has made a lot of
Okay.
stuff for a lot of people.
Sun-
This suit is definitely his like
Sun and
his
Moon
baby,
Couture.
but- Yeah, Sun and Moon Couture.
Sun and Moon Couture.
Yeah,
don't think
let
I
me
know him.
see. Sun and Moon.
I usually know everybody in the TouchDesigner scene.
Couture. Well, no, he's not a touch. He's not a touch
C-O-U-T.
guy. He's more just an LED hardware guy.
Gotcha. I found him.
But
Wow.
but yeah,
Cool.
that guy. I called him on the phone, and he was like, first off, if you want video resolution on your body, just like wear an iPad on your chest, and it's not gonna look good. And I was
Crushing
he was
you-
like,
crushing.
that is just, yeah, he was just like, that is so far. There's a reason no one does this. There's a reason Taylor Swift, Beyonce is
Right.
not walking around in a light suit.
Right.
Like, it's a physics problem. And
Yeah.
the issue is, yeah, it's like he described it really well to me off the bat. He was like, it's like a paperclip. You pull it this way, it works great. It's very durable. You do this 5 times, broken.
It's broken. Yeah.
And that is definitely how the wires on my suit have worked. We've it's been finicky. We've had to do a lot of repairs, and we're working on a new design actually that doesn't uses stronger cabling, that's more durable, or even strips maybe in some spots. But we started because I wanted to augment the show and put video on my body, and I approached him, and then we decided to go for something that was 1,000 lights, which was enough to get a riser or a rotational radial effect, or
something that you can recognize as motion and movement.
The best thing we got with it was we got the Mario overalls when I do like a Mario cover in my show.
Hell yeah.
We had like blue overalls with red on my torso, and people always love that. People always lose their shit. They're like, "What? He's literally Mario." Yeah, that's cool. But I also like started cropping it to different body limbs for different times, and I did all that cropping in TouchDesigner. Yeah, so that's sort of how it came to be. I wanted to take the TouchDesigner stuff, knowing that TouchDesigner is just like the Swiss Army knife of audiovisual suite tools.
100%.
Like it's just the best thing for like, I have this idea and I want this software to talk to this software with this data. It is like
100%.
the thing for that. So I knew as I was getting into it that it was worth going down that and being persistent. And so my friend Anthony, Sun and Moon Couture, helped me with the hardware, but then I actually just hit up a friend in the TouchDesigner community online about the software side of things, because I didn't really know how to do video input to pixel map.
Right,
I actually didn't do that portion of the project. Yeah, and he did the pixel map for me, my friend Vinay, and he's a great, like, he more does installations and stuff like that. But he made it so I just put in a video top and it spits out the output to the Students DMX.
That's awesome.
Via ArtNet.
That's awesome.
But it's all wireless. It's Wi-Fi. You just run your own Wi-Fi network on stage. I bring a router. And the other thing that's sick, yeah, it's totally untethered, which is awesome for 1,000 lights. And it's streamed via Wi-Fi, which is kind of insane. We thought we were going to run into a lot of issues with bandwidth.
There's no latency?
Like there's barely any, if there is some. It's like probably down to 8 milliseconds or something.
Wow,
but,
wow.
Yeah, it's great. I feel very, very lucky in that regard, to have all those things like working the way they are and to have that team of people help me.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome when you can have like people like express your vision and, you know, help you along the way to kind of get to where you want to get to, especially when they're like...
It's nice when you pay them too.
Oh, that's definitely nice, for sure. I wasn't even getting into that, you know, I know how that is.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, the TouchDesigner community, and just in general, like the lighting community, or like, you know, whatever, the visual community, I think is very open to like, oh, you just have a really cool idea. I'm down to like, it's like, it's the both. It's like having a cool idea and then wanting to like actually use it in a show and implement it. I think that those two things are like piquing people's interest, because it's like, if you have just a good idea, but you're not going to actually use it, then maybe I'm not interested. But if you have a good idea and you're going to showcase it and use it, then it's like, why not collaborate here, you know, and do it together? Like, I think that
I'll also say that in general, I find the visual community to be much more transparent and giving
100%
than the audio community. Funny enough, like the audio community is like, pay for my stems, pay for my sample pack, pay for this, pay for that. TouchDesigner's like, pay $5 for my Patreon and just go download all these TOE files and like whatever you want, you know.
I mean, this is something that we talk about a lot on the podcast. I actually have this down for talking about it after the set, but I'm happy to talk about it now. Like, why do you think that is? Like, the visual community is the most sharing, open, you know, kind of like open source, but also like just like, even somebody with a Patreon has a YouTube channel where they'll have the same thing there for free, but you can pay for like the finished project. And like the music industry is not like that at all. Like, you know, and it's also like, there's also like a very cutthroat aspect of the music industry of like, you're going to steal my idea. And in the visual industry, it's like, if you use my idea, that's success, right? Like, if somebody uses my patch in their show, I made it. Like, as you have your foot in both places, like, what do you think that is? Like, why do you think that that's kind of like such a different thing? I mean, they're both like nerds, right? Both geeks. Like, what's the...
Yeah, I think I have 3 thoughts there that I just wrote down, like, roughly. I think one thing is that working in visuals, at least in the music festival scenes, which is something you've alluded to, that's how I met you. You were sort of enhancing a DJ, or like, I think it was Beyond One Fest. You were like enhancing that whole experience for people with the LED wall. And I think inherently you are the quiet person behind the curtain, giving and making something better. You're not the musician on stage who's got a lot of the ego around this experience and like the affirmations. And I think I think that inherently as a format, at least within the music festival world, not in like the film world, but a lot of the music festival world, it's a very giving thing to be part of a team and be a VJ or an LD as opposed to just the artist. The other thing there is that I think at least the music community is somewhat jaded on the fact that social media is dictated by video and it is required in order to retain people's attention. And so they harbor a degree of resentment and need to hold their art as a preserved thing that should be valued just as much, but it doesn't have the same visual presentation that other artists have a leg up on for current platforms. That's another thing I'd say contributes to that. Third thing is just, I do think in the way that, I think the last thing is just a bit more, I'm optimistic that like how well organized and documented the visual world is. I think like a lot of the music world is very concerned about use and rights in a way that the visual community is not as much. And I think with maybe some Web3 development stuff and being able to track royalties more easily, the music world will open up more, and all these little micro payments, maybe in 20 years, if it ever actually gets picked up, will make the difference there. But yeah, it's all pretty hot talk right now and not a lot of traffic to these platforms. So I'm hoping that those will come through, like Web3 with music. But I'm not totally sold on it yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I always find it very interesting because it's like, you know, they're kind of similar trajectories in terms of like artistry. Obviously, the music industry is way more evolved and mature than the visuals industry, and film is definitely a side of here. That's, you know, video art in general. But it's like ethos, and I you know, I've had a few people that are like older than us. You know, I could just say that they're literally physically older than us, and they've been around for a longer time. And I always thought that it came from like the open source kind of like coding scene of like, you know, the demo scene, or like just like coding in general has always been a very kind of like open. I mean, there's two schools obviously, but like the more you know, avant-garde, or like the more underground scene of coding is always the kind of like sharing and open source. And I figured that that's kind of like what spoke to the visual scene, because that's kind of like where a lot of processing, right, like computer graphics processing, you know, code into visual, or just like, you know, video mixing is very like nerdy kind of geeky kind of thing from this place. And I think a lot of it comes from there, but it turns out that it doesn't. Or at least not that it doesn't, but at least the demo scene aspect doesn't. I found out that the demo scene is actually they're very insular. They don't share a lot of things, which I found very, very interesting. This is from the episode with the Tool creator, with Thomas. And it was kind of a little bit upsetting to honestly hear that. And then I'm kind of like, well, where does it still come from, right? And I think that it's just like this inherent kind of thing, like you're saying, like the behind the scenes aspect of it, like the ego. Another thing that I want to talk to you about after the set, but performing in front of an audience versus being behind the scenes is going to alter the way that you approach your art and kind of look at your art, right? And then the fact that, at least when it comes to the motion graphics world and the 3D world, there's a huge aspect of, you know, there is no guide, right? There's a manual for Cinema 4D, but there's no like, you know, best tips and techniques, or like After Effects, right? Like really the way that we all learned these programs is by like Video Copilot, you know, and like, you know, whatever, like Red Giant used to have their channel. And it's like, it's kind of like the advent of YouTube at the same time of like the advent of like motion graphics becoming more accessible to people, was like this ethos of like, oh, if I want to get my name out as an educator, or like as the best motion graphics artist, I'm going to make a YouTube channel and show all these things, right? And then it's like, it was before like the kind of like keep it close to yourself. And I think that it kind of broke the ice for everybody of like, the more I share, the more I'm elevated in my community as like a educator, you know, I'm the best at this thing because look how I'm doing it, right? So I think that
that curve is exponential too, in the sense that you get more
totally
feedback from more people and you learn
100%.
more quickly. And yeah.
And if I was taught everything on YouTube, then I'm going to want to do the same thing as well, right? Because that's like kind of how I'm being taught right now. If I learn, another thing is like, there's no classical school for visuals. right?
I
There's
was
no
just about to say, like, the newness of the visual community. Like, just look at the term DJ versus VJ. I'm still saying VJ to people, and they're like, "What is that?"
What is that?
And I'm like,
Right.
"Visual jockey," and they're like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, that's like there is a human. It's not just like
Yeah.
some random thing that magically makes everything look good."
Totally.
So I think just the straight up, like, I look at classical versus jazz. The institutionalization of classical music has happened for a long period of time. Jazz, it's really just starting to hit like full academia, where now we have like all the suburban, like, white cis males are learning how to play jazz and applying to conservatory. Not all,
Finally.
but you know, yeah, finally, exactly, we got them. No, and we need more of them. No, we don't. We need more women in jazz. Thank God. Like, please. But yeah, there's just a straight timeline thing there too to consider of like the fact. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Where it's becoming way more popular in the age where sharing online is like the precedent to how you start a career. Yeah, I think it's lent itself to people just wanting more help. There's less documentation. Like, there's forums and just contacts and people you hit up.
Yeah. I think it's definitely. I'm very grateful to it because I think that it breeds community. I mean, the touch designer community is one of the best communities
Dude,
out there for
yeah.
art in general.
It's unreal. Yeah.
Programming, art, kind of processing, all the kind of generative art. It's just amazing. And it's almost like transcended touch designer as a program. It's like more of just like concepts and techniques. So I think it's really
that's
cool.
what's
And
so cool when you have such a versatile tool. It gives so many different people. It attracts so
exactly.
many different ideas.
And
so
like, imagine if it would have attracted like Coder A, but because there was no community, then Coder A is like in the dark. But because it attracts Coder A and there's a community, Coder A is now like shoving all his code online, and then like all of a sudden you're like mixing, matching all these different modalities into one and getting all the information. It's like, it's amazing. It's really amazing. Shout out to Greg Hermanovich. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, but he's a freaking god. And we love him, and he should live forever. Okay, so he's the creator of Touch Designer. Okay, so now shifting a little bit, and we're gonna jump into your set here because I'm really excited to see how you're doing things. I have them all kind of in one, but TEDx, America's Got Talent, and the neuroscience publication at Harvard. Those are maybe different. Maybe we could talk about TEDx and America's Got Talent first. Like, what was that like? Those experiences, kind of give us a little bit of some details of that.
Yeah, I'd say, both were big learning experiences in different ways. TEDx was cool because ever since I started my project called Plexus Play, like a plexus is a network of neurons that talk to each other and together can accomplish something more unique or better than just one neuron can alone. So it's kind of like the notion of teamwork. And I always wanted that element of play and interactivity involved in my show, which is another reason I got into touch and all these other visual elements to cue the audience and stuff. But I always wanted to do a like smartphone or audience data driven show. Like, since I started my project, I was like, the fact that I love neuroscience, all this systems way of thinking, and then I love music and performing, it's like the ultimate harmony of those would be, can the audience have some degree of autonomy over the show? We did a really basic version of it where it's basically like Netflix Bandersnatch, where there's moments in the episode where you choose your own adventure.
I love that.
It's basically that. We set up a show where Touch Designer pinged a web app that we designed on everyone's Android or Apple devices. We had a browser app. They just scanned a QR code at the beginning of the show. It was in the program, and then they're on this web page. And Touch Designer, when the oh yeah, here you go. This is a good thing to show. There's like a whole skip to the slide that has the setup of the show. Keep going. That one, yeah. So we had the web app up top, and that would receive like Ableton is where is Ableton in this? Ableton would basically output Touch Designer outputs a decision up to the web app to trigger the voting ballot. And then all the audience phones have a timer that starts counting down, and they get to see what they voted for and what everyone else is voting for. It's like gets tallied in real time, so they can change their vote last minute if it's down to two things.
Interesting.
And then that
So democratic.
it's just yeah, it is democratic. And then it's at the end of that, it just triggers the locator in the Ableton timeline, which then triggers the suit and the show visuals and me to perform. So it's all automated. I don't need to do anything, and it's audience choose their own adventure through an Ableton show, which is cool.
I love how
Yeah.
Ableton can be like the master for all of this, right? Just like,
Dude.
'cause it's just sending out signals, and then you just get the signals and transmute them into whatever you want.
I heard this early on when because I came to it being an Ableton guru that wanted to learn touch, but when I first spoke to someone in the touch community who had been in it for a while, he was like, "Do not do anything with TouchDesigner's timeline. It's like useless for like making animations. Like do everything in Ableton." And I was like, "Oh, perfect, because that's what my inclination is, anyways." To do.
Yeah. It's totally. I mean, it's useless is harsh. Let's not be so mean, but
yeah, sorry.
I'm joking. It is kind of useless. It's more like it's kind of the same way that if you wanted to animate like lights for a lighting show, if you like, the best thing to do is just use a Grand MA, like a lighting console, because that's what it's made for, right? Like, if you're going to do a music show where the music is the timeline, it makes sense to use the music software for that, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. Super cool. I mean, it must have had amazing reception in that kind of like TED kind of like technology place.
Yeah, what was fun about it was like there were just a lot of people talking about very serious topics. I think prior to me, there was like a
and then
lecture
you were
on
like silly and funny.
Yeah, and then I was just like this lighthearted dude who plays fun music and danced on stage and stuff, and I think it was well appreciated. I will say from that in general, like I was not both America's Got Talent and TEDx. I was promised a lot of exposure and invested significant times into designing those shows. I mean, again, I collaborated with a couple people to make the software and touch that triggered the web app. I didn't make the web app myself. I had a couple people help me. But yeah, that took a team. We were talking about it for like 2.5 months before the show, planning it all out, talking to the venue, making sure we had enough bandwidth. Like it was like basically being a touring production company with me and 2 friends online in Miami and India. It was like, can we do this? And we did. Wow. We succeeded. But it was, I would say, in terms of the actual exposure from that video, it was definitely probably not worth the price, but for my own artistic satiation of this is like life dream of mine, and we did it. It was like very, very fulfilling in that sense. America's Got Talent was, I would never think to audition for that show for television.
Yeah, I can't imagine
to hit the festival scene, and I'm trying to just like bring what I'm doing there. But I got scouted by an agent to submit something,
No way.
and then I submitted something, and they didn't like the voting thing. I was gonna have the judges vote, just like the TEDx thing, and
you were gonna do that the same show there.
Yeah, same type of show, but different repertoire probably. And then I pitched something different that was much more just like play through this act that I made an 18 previous contestant mashup from dancers, like musicians and stuff on the show, and I got them all cleared with the legal team. It was this whole thing, a 1.5-month production process, and then they never aired it.
They never aired your America's Got Talent show?
They never aired the audition. They never aired the
way.
audition. They filmed it. All the judges loved it. The audience was on their feet.
So what, is just like you think it was like a legal thing? Like they didn't have the rights to use whatever it was?
No, we cleared it all with the legal team ahead of time too. It was more, I think, the fact that I didn't have, well, I think one reason was they wanted me to stand in my light suit, in my whole getup, and be like, I'm a jazz musician on the interviews, and misdirect the audience for the sake of the surprise during the audition, which I just couldn't really bring myself to do. And that was part of it, maybe, for the
Wait, you're in the actual
call.
trailer too?
Yes.
That's so weird.
And dude, there's another thing. If you keep scrolling, like I had a handful of fans, like 10 fans on Instagram, sent me screenshots of the peacock. Yeah, I'm in the Hulu preview. I think part of it was also my proposal for the second round was not as catered to the show. I just drew a boundary and was like, I can't spend my entire year catering to this show when I'm not getting any money and there's no guarantee of exposure or anything. So I sort of set a boundary.
I can't believe they didn't air it. Is that like, were you?
Dude, I know.
That must have really bummed you out, no? I mean, it's like, that's kind of shitty.
It was.
Especially because it's like they filmed it and you got passed. Like, what the fuck?
I got 4 yeses immediately. The legal team this was the craziest thing about the whole experience. Within 30 seconds of walking off stage with this adrenaline high of being on national television, or at least documented for national television, you are in front of a lawyer and they are telling you what happens now. And you're like blacked out from this crazy experience. And they're just like,
that's what they get you.
Legal thing. Exactly. Yeah. I was just like, that is crazy.
You're like, yeah, I'll sign. I'll sign it. Sure.
Yeah, no, it was a silly thing. I mean, I didn't sign anything in that moment, but it was just like so crazy to be on stage and all the lights and stuff, and then just outside in the blaring California sun, like being written and talked to by a lawyer. I was like, this is
did they offer you like any reasoning, or it just literally just didn't air and you're like, Like, was there an agent that you could call
Yeah,
or
they
anything like that?
No. Well, okay, yeah, man, it was really unfortunate. I mean, I got upset about it for like 2-ish weeks because of the sheer amount of time I put into the project
Yeah,
and the fact that it
excitement.
was enjoyed by everyone. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
audience loved it. It was both that and the TEDx thing were really, they underscored for me that marketing and how you present yourself, as clickbaity as it might need to be,
Right.
is very critical in the modern age. Like, the TEDx thing had a hard lesson where my project, which I spent months preparing for, not to say that these other speakers didn't prepare for months, but this other guy who was involved in TEDx, who I won't remain nameless, he was very disrespectful to the board, caused a lot of drama between all the other speakers, like just not a good person. And he is the person who spoke about a very clickbaity hot topic, and his talk got promoted to the main TED page, and he got all these book deals and all these things from it. And it was just like, that's just, morally speaking, it was just like everyone else who spoke was like, that's just so
weird.
dark the way this worked out. So yeah,
weird.
anyways, TV, major
What
corporate
did the
opportunity
AGT tell you?
promises.
Like, what did they tell you that they didn't air it? Like, what was
I
their
got an
reasoning?
email that said, the judges have decided to not go forth with airing your audition. We don't provide, we can't give concrete feedback with how many auditions there are. We don't have any for you. And then I got 2 individual messages from employees of AGT on Instagram, both saying, I cannot believe they didn't air your audition. I never really enjoy a lot of I work for this show. I've worked on it for 5 years. I've never loved it. I immediately followed you and was really interested in your project. Keep doing what you're doing. Do not let this decision
So
phase you at all. So,
crazy.
yeah.
I don't get it. So, but isn't like, because I was kind of like interested. Like, why did you get the 4 yeses, but then you weren't on like a first episode?
dude, I
Like,
know, that's what I'm saying. It's
is
a
that not
talent
how-
show, but I know. I've said it many a time.
don't you
4
automatically
yeses
get
means
invited?
Nothing.
Don't you
4 yeses
automatically
means
get
nothing.
invited to the next episode? So they just like, they might accept a lot of people, and then when they're editing it, they're like, oh, we don't like this one or whatever.
Here's the thing. What ended up making it to airing over me was just something that would, like, I think there were many things. They have 150 people who audition, right?
Right.
But they also want to tell a story. They don't just want.
course.
I mean, my stuff is very unique. Like,
Yeah.
it appeals to
Yeah.
people, I think, in general, and it inspires.
But you're
people to
not
just
like,
wow, look at all I could do.
nobody
But I'm
molested
not-
you or anything.
I'm not a guy. Yeah, exactly. I'm not a blind 8-year-old puppeteer who like is killing it somehow, Or I'm not. These guys were in from.
You should have said that
somewhere
you're
in the
blind. That
Midwest.
you're a blind visual artist with your LED suit.
Yeah,
it's
that's
the only
right.
way you
But
could see
these
is
guys
if
were, like,
lights are
throwing-
flashing.
These guys were throwing marshmallows from the balcony and catching them in their mouths on stage, and like that aired
Right.
instantly. It's just
Right,
like
right.
it's just the stuff that's gonna drive views, the stuff that's gonna be a compelling story.
I mean,
They want
honestly,
people
I would feel
with
like
buzzers
your stuff
and drama.
would be so cool. Like, that would be like, that's like you're talking to like a young crowd, like EDM, cool young crowd. It's like a totally different crowd than AGT would get. You're obviously like making everything yourself. I don't know, whatever. Fuck them. They're dumb fucks. They don't know anything. You know what I'm realizing though? Because you mentioned his name twice, and I was like, wait a second, I know that name, Vinay. I think
Vinay
Vinay Khan, Vinay Kher, yeah. I've
You know
worked with
him?
him as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've worked with him as well. He's
No
such
way.
a lovely guy. He's such a
Dude,
lovely guy.
the
He helped me
kindest
develop.
guy.
He helped me develop an app that we never really did anything with it, but we've had multiple conversations on the phone. He's such a nice guy. That's awesome. I love that you tapped into him as well, because he's underexposed as well. Like, he does.
Dude,
Now that I'm
no one
seeing
knows about
what
this
other
guy.
things he does is crazy.
yeah, like
and
the
he's,
heart
like,
rate sensing museum installations and stuff. He does really cool work, and no one
Really
knows
cool
about him,
work.
really. Yeah,
All right, well, we got to shout him out. I
So shout out-
I
yeah,
have to
shout out
get him on the
Vinay
podcast. I have to get him on the podcast.
you should. You should.
Yeah, I definitely should. I'm gonna make a note for that. Okay, cool. So, TEDx, America's Got Talent. Fuck those guys. They're dumb fucks. What about the neuroscience publication at Harvard? What was that all about?
Yeah, that was okay. So that was, I mean, it was really just a summer internship, and I lucked out big time. I worked on a like a mammal model, a mouse model, for how the immune system communicates with the respiratory system. And yeah, that was kind of it. It was just like, how does inflammation in an asthma model in mice translate to communication with the immune system and upregulation of certain proteins and expressions and pathways.
So this is when you were in
I was,
school.
Yes, it was in between years at college, and again, dude, it's a lot of this is just who you know. I had a friend who is a major researcher in Boston, and I was best friends with his son, And that guy just recommended me to a principal investigator, a PI is what they're called in the science world. And that person just took me out for the summer. And that's kind of it. That lab it also spoiled me. I worked a job straight out of school that was also in another lab, but in comparison, I just had nowhere near the same experience. That lab was super well funded. I was one of 4 Americans. Everyone else was from around the world. The World Cup was happening at the same time. It was like such a sick environment to hang out with people. Cool. So yeah, I was very lucky to have that.
Did you ever consider going deeper into science, like as a career? Like, does it intrigue you?
I did, yeah, definitely. I was pre-med for my first 2 years at Oberlin. But my sister was becoming a doctor. She's an OBGYN doctor. Shout out, Flo.
Nice. Shout out.
But yeah, she's great, and I'm glad someone went through the bushwhacking and did that. From folled the track of
you
childhood.
You gotta have a doctor in the family. You gotta have a doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I have this red rash.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah. So yeah, but I think. What was I speaking about there? Just
doing science and following it as a career.
Oh, yeah. I quickly. The thing was, I was at this conservatory. It was one of the best conservatories in the world, and all my peers were just so committed in the musical department that I really felt a sense of like heart's path with music, and my emotions and learning more about music really got my whole person invested in it. And the main thing, though, that distinguished the decision between science and music for me was seed of an idea, crazy amounts of motivation and inspiration to idea complete and out in the world. In science, it's typically 2 to 4 years of I have this idea of a hypothesis, I do a lit search for 6 months, I design my methodologies for another 3 months, I execute the whole experiment over the course of half a year, I analyze all the data over another half a year, write the paper, submit it. Before you know it, your data could be crap after the first 2 years, and you still have to like write it up and submit it, but it's way less of a fulfilling process, and you're just signing up for that every day. So, and then I looked at like, I had this idea for a song, I had something happen to me in my life, it's like in the show. Nowadays, with all the skills and stuff I have, I can like have, like someone was just like, make a Dragon Tales remix for my wedding, and I was like, all right, sure, cool. Yeah. Like that's my wedding gift to you. And it turns out to be one of the best performing videos I've ever made, which is also hilarious too. But I made that in like a week, It's just that's like, awesome. It's done. It's in the show. So
that's awesome.
That was my main attraction to music. Yeah.
Interesting. I totally relate to that. Different, but similar with film, you can come up with an idea for a movie, write a script, film the movie, and then edit the movie. It might be a 2-year process. You're not getting any, not that it's important to get feedback from the audience, but at the end of the day, you want, like, art is for people to see and experience, and like if it takes 2 years for anybody to like get that experience and for you to get that for you to get that feedback is difficult. I went through it a few times in school, and I'm like, this is hard. This is hard. And like same thing, like you write a script, but then your whole life changes or whatever, you have a breakup or something, and you're like, but that script is, you're tied into it. Maybe you even shot it already. Maybe you're in rehearsals. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't really have any emotional connection to what I'm editing right now. Like, how do I, it was a very hard thing for me to wrap my head around. And I think that there's, I'm just halfway through Joe Rogan with Quentin Tarantino and what's his name? Alex Garland, the guy who, not Alex Garland, I can't remember his name, but he wrote Pulp Fiction with Tarantino. Obviously not as famous as Tarantino, but it was super interesting just to kind of like hear their talks about creativity and stuff like that. So I think that there are certain people that know how to like compartmentalize like that long, drawn out kind of like creative experience and maybe even thrive from it. But for me, it was like the moment I started doing visuals and like, instant feedback from my audience, like phones are coming out or somebody's coming to the VJ booth like, oh, whoa, what do you do? And it's like, you kind of get it right away. And then for yourself, it's like feels good. And then, times infinitum with like real-time generative graphics where it's like an alive thing that's like constantly evolving, almost like, an instrument or something. It was very addictive in that sense of just like getting that feedback, getting that response.
Feedback, no pun intended. TouchDesigner fanatic there, feedback loops. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're getting to that point now where we're going to jump into your computer and get to see your set. And for anybody, not many people are listening to this audio-wise, but just in general, if you're watching, don't forget that after the set, we have another portion of interviews. So stick around. So we're gonna jump into your setup here, and first we're going to watch this new music video that is should be released by the time this comes out. So go check it out, or stick around here and watch it, and then we're gonna see how Matt made it all. So let's jump into that.
Oh yeah, and the little precursor of this music video, the song is called
Please.
Life on Shuffle. It's basically just about needing to change things up in your life with your monotonous routines as an adult, as we all come to them with adulting. But yeah, changing things up, and it's sort of a play on words with shuffling a playlist and then the dance form shuffling. So there we go.
Awesome. I'm excited to see it. Let's go. This is awesome.
I just want my life on shuffle.
Yeah. This is awesome.
Yeah, I love the attitude of the dancers. Everyone has a
It's
little
awesome.
personality.
Super. Oh, nice. Nice. You're so funny, dude. You have a great on stage kind of personality. Yeah, it's great.
This second drop is probably my favorite shot, I think, of the video.
Hell yeah. Nice. Sick. Hell yeah.
Dude, Chris has so much attitude. I love Chris.
You're a good dancer too.
Trying.
Like a quadruple threat. Cute. Did you do the choreography?
No, the choreography was done in collaboration with an artist here.
Okay. Okay, cool. That'd have been too much.
I mean, I was down, but it was way more opportunity to collaborate that I wanted to take up on.
Hell yeah. These
Yeah,
guys
some
are
great
great.
ideas like this kick, the kick transitions and stuff. Like I never would have thought of that shit. So
Nice, the stick drop. I love that.
yeah, this stick drop is great. Also, they
yeah.
had this idea for Chris to come back, grab the stand.
And
Wait,
take this. It's so
yeah,
cute.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome, dude.
So yeah, I was really happy with how that came out, and it was a really cool collaboration to work with dancers. I started shuffle dancing about 1.5 years ago, just like YouTube University, self-taught, just like cinema, and then I went to one class here in LA, and I met this woman who just had great energy, and I told her I was like a DJ for festivals, and I had this song about shuffling, and I really wanted to collaborate and work with people, and she was like, oh yeah, I could teach it in my class and we could just pick out the dancers from that. She was like really open to it. It's very cool. So yeah, Mary Grace is her name. She's amazing.
Awesome.
Amazing shuffle
Awesome.
dancer here in LA. So.
So I have a lot of, I mean, this is kind of like a little bit different than what you're normally doing with like a backdrop, you know, the LED kind
Yeah.
of is, well, I don't want to show my, the LED is kind of, my recommendation is like super right-wing politics stuff. I'm Israeli. I can have my own political ideas. I'm not American.
Of course.
Where was I thinking? Okay. Yeah, no, like it's different than what you're normally doing with like your kind of backdrop stuff. Was it, what was kind of like the idea of having a floor, like an LED floor? It was just like something so different.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do something different because it's just so much of what I do is backdrop content for festivals, and I wanted to change up the game. And I've been shuffling for a while, but like it's just been something fun that I do live at shows and never really promote on my page. So I think it'll be a really cool, different thing when I post this on Monday next week, just for people to be like, damn, I heard he was learning how to shuffle, but like that's like all synced up and like a full production with multiple people. And I think it's a really like next tier. I actually in August decided to pull a lot of my jazzier instrumental music because a couple people from the music industry saw me at festivals and were like, I loved your set. I was like down to check you out, potentially work with you. And then I saw like streaming wise and like genre wise, what you had up on music platforms was not reflective at all as what I saw at your show. And it kind of was like a turnoff for me. And I received two different instances of that feedback. And I was like, huh, I do want more consistency with my brand.
Can't people like compartmentalize the fact that you could do both? It's like so stupid, but
true.
I get it.
But I would say more
still
like algorithmically reaching those types of people. It's
For
better
sure.
to segregate the things. So I just put all that under an old alias, Plexus, and Life on Shuffle, and like one other song are like the only things on my Spotify right now. So
Nice.
starting fresh,
Career
wise, which is
Hell yeah.
crazy. But I mean,
Hell yeah.
SoundCloud's still got plenty of stuff on it. But yeah.
Another question that I had for you, and like, this is like personal, but also I'm just kind of interested, and I think that the audience would be as well. A lot of your stuff is very high production value, and you're getting like a lot of bang for your buck, so to speak. Are you funding all this stuff? And then like, do you have a day job? Like, what do you do to kind of be able to afford all this stuff?
Yeah, great question. I do my project full time right now. I mean, I'll say I just moved to LA a year ago, and I lived and taught much more in San Diego for about 4 or 5 years before moving here. And I kind of have saved up with the notion of moving here and not worrying about finances for my first couple of years here, which is a big privilege to have, but I planned accordingly for it. I also do, I still do teach like 2 students music production who have just been like long students, and I've had them forever, and they're kind of just like friends. They'll show me plugins during lessons now, like, oh, did you see this is on sale? And like, oh, this plugin's, and I'm like, whoa, okay.
That's awesome.
So it's cool. It's just a hang for a couple students now. But yeah, I also part-time this year, just like 15 hours a month-ish, 12 hours a month-ish for the first half of the year. My friend had a VR meditation startup, and I was making TD Ableton systems for the VR meditation company, composing the music and making visuals. That's
awesome.
Yeah, I could show you. Actually, that would be something that would be really cool to give you a tiny little window into.
Sure.
It's let me see if I have it in here. Yeah, I do actually have it. You probably aren't hearing this, but that's okay. The rough gist of this is my what you do with this system is your phone sits on your belly, and the gyroscope of the phone actually communicates your breathing while you're lying on the ground. And it feeds into Ableton, and each scene in Ableton up here in the top right is triggered by like this crossing of a threshold in touch triggers the next scene and melody note. So your breath is linked to the next note of the melody in the piece.
Wow.
And it's also linked to like a filter on the synth. So the deeper you breathe, the more noise sweep you get. And then
That's so cool.
as this progresses, you add more instruments, the visuals get more involved.
Yeah.
Towards the end, you have this like more like reveal wow moment kind of thing too.
Nice.
But yeah, this is all like a more meditation based TD Ableton system.
Super
that I
cool.
worked on for a while. So
Interesting. So
yeah, that was a side hustle thing to make some money, but mostly what I'm doing right now is performing at festivals and performing shows for income. Yeah.
well, man, good
And
for you.
this
You know,
project was self-funded, so.
yeah, I mean, good for you. Like it was more of just like I'm impressed, that you're able to do all this stuff. Like it's not easy, trust me, I know, it's like one of those things. So congrats, Um,
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a lot of
and
hard work, but it's cool.
well, hopefully this video is really successful, and I'm excited to see how it was made.
Yeah, so this is the Ableton session. Things get pretty hefty in here. We've got like 150 tracks in this
Damn.
song. Yeah, I do a lot of sound design and like one-off sounds when it comes to drops and things. And then like management of a lot of vocals can take up a lot of tracks. But yeah, the way I run my Ableton mostly for making EDM is the drums are its separate group up top, and then side chain is literally everything else in the track. So everything moves with the drums pretty much. The drums are pretty dictating in EDM. Yeah, I just organize my stuff: percussion, bass, chords, vibraphone, other melody synths, vocals, and effects. I think the thing to like spend any time here on is more like the bass synthesis. That's the stuff that's like really, I feel like, juicy in the sense of my like production. But yeah, because I think we heard the whole song, but I think like a couple moments that would be cool to show are just, unless you have anything in particular you want to hear. But I
mean, I would love to see how, yeah, definitely what you want to show us in terms of this, and then see how it's kind of like what's triggering what in touch. Could you also just click on that little hide thing in the bottom there?
Oh, this? Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. Yes. Cool. Yeah, so at least for this drop, I think a couple of things to chat about. I mean, the percussion and the drums are really basic. It's just like a couple tops. Very standard, like house loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the basses are really where this stuff gets juicy. And I've been getting really, just in terms of musical inspiration, which I think we'll probably talk about a little bit in the post breakdown stuff, second
Definitely.
interview. But this genre called color bass, I've been really, really getting into. And what they do is they take the crazy EQ density of a growl or dubstep wavetable synthesis. You get like all kinds of harmonics, low and high and mids, and you can feed those through resonators or vocoders and give them the quality of a minor 11 chord or like a dominant 7 sharp 11 chord. Like all the jazzy nerdy training that I have can come through in a song that sounds like a bass festival bass song. And I've been really enraptured in that process in the last like year in terms of like shaping my sound and developing it more. But yeah, it's really cool stuff. So like this, let me see if I can I guess one spot where this is really evident is the third drop, because I just talked about color bass. Maybe I'll just like play a bit of this, but here's like the basses from the third drop.
Nice. It's all very Daft Punk-esque.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, I don't know. It like
No,
reminds me of it a little bit.
I'm glad it. Yeah, it definitely has this like funky French
Yeah.
house kind of thing to it for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
The
Got funk.
I'm looking for where is that? Oh, it's here. Yeah, this is an example of where you take a sound like
Whoa.
and I've fed this. So this is a plugin that actually just retunes anything to whatever scale you want, which is kind of cool within like Western tonal theory. But that's the original sound. I remapped it to a single pitch, and then I fed it through the vocoder to get a full chord.
Cool.
And that chord is changing. So this is like the saws. This is what drives the vocoder. This will be pretty loud, but yeah. So that's what drives the vocoder, and then you feed other stuff through that, and you get that harmonic quality with a more like electronic sound. It's much. It's very cool when it happens with like really growly basses, which I can maybe show some other examples of later. But yeah, the bass sound design, and just I don't know if anyone's using Serum or paying attention to that type of software synth and stuff, but this is how wavetable synthesis works, where this is a slice of a 3D wavetable. So like it would just be like a saw wave or a sine wave or something like that, basic. But you take that slice and you make it a 3D plane that you can actually scroll through
Oh.
and change the
Interesting.
timbre of your synthesizer. So it's not just
Oh.
a single waveform oscillator. Now you have 250 slices to
Right.
slide
Oh,
through.
that's crazy.
So creating these sounds, this is just one thing I'll show, and then I don't know, maybe I'll show some little like vibraphone moments in isolation so people can hear what my instrument sounds like. But if I mute all this stuff, here's what the bass sounds like by itself. I'm gonna solo it. And then we add saturation and multiband. A little more resonance with it. And then this is, I think, the vocoder. Oh no, that's more serum effects stuff.
Oh, so you're moving
But this is just
it
a chain.
through it. You're moving
Yeah,
it
this is
through
just a
that.
chain of tons of effects. That does a lot. And then EQing, OTT, and soothe. Soothe just adds like some, just soothes the sound.
What's
basically.
OTT?
But OTT stands for over the top. It's a type of multiband compression where it just makes it so in your face.
Interesting.
But it's a type of compression.
Cool.
So yeah, that's some examples. That's another example of a chord-based thing. So without the vocoder, it's just ba 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 ba. But then you have na 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 coming in when you add the vocoder on. It's subtle, but those are the kind of things that my jazz brain really appreciates, having
love
other
it.
harmonics on the
Well,
side.
that's
So,
what makes good
yeah,
music, right? Is like all these kind of like layers making into one thing.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
yeah, let's check out the vibrosphere, and then I'd love to see like what you're sending to touch. Like, what is the signals that you're sending?
Yeah, totally. We can go into the animation stuff after this. So, this is how
That's
the
just
vibraphone
raw?
sounds a little bit. Yes, with some
It's
reverb.
like some
Let me.
reverb.
Where's the reverb on the leads? Let me see. Yeah, that's raw without any compression or okay.
Wow.
And then that's what the
That
effects and
reverb
stuff.
is raw. That's the whole point of the vibrosphere, I guess, right? Is that it vibrates.
Oh yeah, you mean the reverberation of the notes? Yeah, that's
It's literally
yeah,
from
that's
the
how it
instrument.
works. Yeah, you can see it in the waveform. It's all you can see the vibrato. in
So
the
cool.
waveforms.
Wow, look at that. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So
What a crazy instrument.
it's very beautiful. I love it. It's funny because but I will say this. Another thing that is sort of a caveat with playing the vibraphone is I'm playing these like intense dubstep drops and then like playing this beautiful glittery instrument over them.
Yeah.
And some people are like, "There's something just like isn't totally matched up with this, like on a subconscious level, I think at festival."
Right.
And so that's why I'm doing more of the MIDI stuff and like the video you first saw where I'm hitting the MIDI triggers of drums and all these vocal samples and stuff. Like that's more where the show's going, and less of this like beauty like ambient thing. But it's cool because at festivals I'll sometimes get paid more to do an ambient set at night, like a sound bath kind of thing, sound ambient set.
I was gonna say like it's kind of like a sound. You're almost like infusing like a sound healing into the crazy electronic music kind of vibes, you know, with this resonance and vibration.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's like mostly what I would show in the Ableton session view, but that's kind of a general sense of how to organize the session. And yeah, let's hop over to the PC, the other laptop,
Sure.
and I'll switch. Mouse is controlling. I might actually need to move my computer slightly out of the way because I can't see my full screen. Do you have my camera still? You want to keep my camera in the feed right now?
We can. Yeah. I mean, I can also just like, not.
Oh yeah, if you just had the screen, that's cool. Because I was just gonna tilt this down to better see the screen for a second, and then tilt it back
Yeah.
up.
Sure.
If you want to put
Sure.
me off screen, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, this is the Windows setup. So here's how. So I export the whole track. This is just the track, and then I actually do a decent amount of hand animation in this process because I really like taking everything and being pretty.
You're not
meticulous with it.
exporting the stems or anything like that?
I have done that in the past for certain projects, but for this one in particular, I knew I was going to be so meticulous with the visual appeal of it that I was going to just do everything kind of more by hand. And I kind of prefer that control, frankly, because there's just following envelopes, following like triggers.
Right.
It can be definitely very useful, but with how analytical my brain is and how quickly I can like export MIDI or just know what that MIDI is and quickly just record it back in or something. It probably saves me more time and transfer of files and space on my computer to just work with a finalized track. This is the second drop thing. That's what I have open right now. And then we can look maybe at an instance of the suit.
So you're in Ableton, you're animating the keyframes by hand, or you're literally is it automatically sending it to you like those
No, I'm doing
those
these are drawn. Yeah.
those are drawn? Wow.
Well, I draw in one of these and then duplicate it out. But
Duplicate it
yeah,
out. Okay.
dude, yeah, you should see some of my show files for the suit are crazy. It's just like it's like 8 lanes of animation and.
But
it's
I
like
love that
an
it's a
hour.
very interesting kind of approach. I guess we kind of spoke about it a little bit, like the timeline in Ableton versus TouchDesigner, but it's just like a very interesting approach where you're really using Ableton as as like an animation software, like as a
Yes.
as you know, like as a timeline software, which is
Yes.
fascinating. I've never seen it kind of been used like that. Usually is the wrong word, but like what I'm used to seeing is like people using Ableton to send a signal out, which I guess is the same concept, right? They're just sending it the waveform out or the triggers out, but you're kind of just making the triggers by hand, which is very interesting. I like it.
It's a more tedious process, but I find that the end result looks way better.
Right, you have
to
more
do it with this
control.
method. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the way my basic setup works, just for those who are less familiar with Ableton, is I have an 8 knob. I have a track called Animate. I have MIDI that sits in that track, which we receive with a TD MIDI device right here. Which in this case, it's actually just triggering the start of the video because this is a piece of rendered content that I then added animation to, so I had to trigger it each time I was working on it. So that's what these MIDI triggers do. And then I have a Ableton device parameters thing from TD Ableton, and that receives all of this audio effects rack macro knob data. This just sits. This is just a blank audio effects rack doing nothing, and it's just knob data. And I make all the lanes for that, and then that gets pipelined
Interesting.
into each one of these.
The
as a
knobs are
select.
animated. Each track of the knob
Yes.
is animated.
Yeah, and then they get scaled to whatever they need to be mapped to in the network,
Right.
and then sent out to a null, and then mapped into the network. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's kind of it. That's the basics. But if I arm this and then play the second drop, you should see roughly what was happening with the dancers we're dancing on. So, we might not be getting audio. That's the only thing. Are you getting audio?
no audio. No.
Oh, this is also not playing. Yeah, let me see if I'm outputting to... I don't think this is going to change much, honestly.
Oh, because we have a different computer.
Yeah, which is okay. I mean...
That's fine. I mean, just for this, I think it's okay.
let me
We
see
can
if I
definitely
can
problem
change this
solve
really
it.
quick.
I don't want to spend too much time on it.
Yeah, let me see
but...
if I can just quickly fix it. But I want to...
Oh wait,
have the option
wait.
that I was sharing.
We I might just not be looking at it. 1 second. Just make another
Oh.
stream here.
There we go. Oh, I hear it.
Yeah, I got it.
Cool.
Oh, I
Yeah,
had it.
Nice.
It went away.
Yeah, I paused it. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll play it again.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back. I'll just trigger this here. The time.
Can you hear it?
Roughly. Yeah, I can hear it too.
Okay. Nice. Sweet.
Yeah, that's sort of the end of that shot. That's kind of it. But these moments of like, if I pause this, you can see like what this knob is directly doing. This is controlling like the in and out of the kaleidoscope of one. I think this might just be like direction of the feedback, similar effect. That's some rotation. I think this is just like overall level maybe, or
This is such an interesting
Yeah,
way to
level of the
animate. Like this
feedback.
is so cool.
yeah, dude.
I'm a
when
little
I
bit
discovered
jealous.
this,
I must say.
dude, you gotta try this. I'm telling you, man. It just makes workflows for developing animation and just straight up doing this and
Right.
having it in the grid and not in a
Right.
30 FPS software is
Totally.
instantly faster.
Totally.
So like,
No, it's just
Yeah, I
like
love doing
literally Ableton is built for stuff like this, right? It's built for
Yeah.
like drawing waveforms or drawing keyframes like that.
totally. So let me pull up. What would be a good like quick thing to show from the suit? Song specific patches. We could do the Dragon Tales thing. Could be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just do that. I'll pull it up. 2022. So yeah, similar workflow, but this one will be let me see if I have oh, I made this one for the Indulge set, so I think this will have it. That was the event that I did. Sometimes, dude, yeah, project organization. I mean, file organization, I'm generally quite good with, but sometimes I forget that I worked on something for a particular show, and then I didn't save it as its own separate file. Let's see if Dragon Tales is in here. Yes. Okay, cool. So, this is large enough that there's actually 2 animate tracks. This was before I used Ableton 12, which you can now add as many macro knobs as you want, but there used to be a limit of 8, so now you can add 16. But when there used to be a limit of 8, I would make 2 tracks and have 2 devices of automation coming in with 8 lanes each. And yeah, the way I've built this, so here's the suit network. It looks like a freaking nightmare, but it's not. This is the end result. So you're outputting here and viewing this. This is all the DMX data, which actually looks really fun whenever you play something. It looks great.
Damn.
It's fun.
Cool.
It's fun to just look at that animated, honestly.
Is that each pixel?
No, these are the universes, and I think
Okay,
each
each
pixel is like a
DMX universe.
peak
That makes
here.
sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
And then yeah, so our friend Vinay, helped me make video input go into this magic black box that he made, and then it spits out the DMX via ArtNet. He made it simple for me. Then
That's awesome.
I made this whole hodgepodge of stuff. But what this basically is this is like a series of ramps and patterns in Touch, and then they just get fed into one massive comp, and then these are the crops for different body limbs at different moments, and I'll just send that
so you
in
can
on a
isolate
multiply.
it.
Exactly, isolate different parts of the body, and then you can animate. Let's see, I think I have.
Do you have to send the suit a certain resolution, like for your visuals?
Yes, yeah.
Like
You have to
in
send
this
the
vertical.
Yeah, it's like, what is it? It's like 1515 by like 800 or something random. Yeah, 1515 by 800.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty strange resolution. I can't remember how we came across that as the end result, but that was a parameter that Vinay gave me, I think. And then, so yeah, this is playing. Let me just, I think that's it. That's kind of it. Oh, I was going to show you these. So this is what each macro, oh, nope, that's not it. Suit TD text. Yeah, here we go. This is how the mappings work. It's literally a text file. The README. No, but so this whole network is the first like series of 8 is a bunch of different ramp patterns. This is hue shifting. Cropping for the limbs is done on the 3rd track, like down in here. If I need reminders of this, I normally have this memorized now, but like this is when the suit goes on to different body parts. There's a general saturation, master level, and
I love that text.
these are all just done as a
It's
text
so
file.
funny.
And these are the limb crop numbers for when I need reminders. But normally I have it all memorized now. So yeah, it is pretty custom built. But now that you have all that, we play this in the timeline, and you should gradually see. Yeah, there we go.
So, are you just like literally like triggering like different body parts with the different like crop levels, or I should say like the different comp levels, or it's a switch?
In this
I guess
sense, actually,
maybe
the
it's a
way,
switch.
yeah. In this, well, as the show currently runs, it actually is mostly pre-rendered content that then gets triggered for the suit, and it is like, it's like rehearsed choreography in that sense. I am planning to make more things that, and like the videos that I'm posting on Instagram from home are real-time reactive with MIDI data. In this sense, I'm like producing a video that I export in this project file, and then I load into a separate TV show.
So
for
these
performing.
are video files that you already made, and then they're being triggered.
Exactly, yeah. So this is the artsy designer suit project file, and then I could show you on my MacBook, which has all the performance files, how that like manifests in a live sense and how that show is set up. It's not as interesting as this, but it's still pretty interesting. So yeah, like let me see if I have. Let me go like.
Colorful.
Oh, let me go to just.
Are the video files just loops, or are they like full on like pieces? Are they just like loops of like,
They
let's
they
say,
are
like this?
individual song pieces for now, but we're working on a setup where we're rendering individual triggers that link to certain sound samples, and then you can improvise with those and trigger them off an SD card. So it's less data to stream.
Gotcha.
Because we're actually
Off of an
increasing the
SD
pixel count.
card, like
Yeah,
on the
we're doing it
suit?
off. Yeah, on the suit because we're gonna try and do more resolution, and streaming over 1,000 pixels, I think, will have more issues. So we're planning to have pre-rendered smaller
Local.
snippets that
And then
then
you'll
can
send
be,
like an
yeah,
OSC
localized.
signal to it or whatever.
Yeah, just a single trigger for that video, which is less data.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's a way to do it, probably at a higher density level. But let me just play this, and this is what the output looks like. Oh, take my hand.
Will you have the suit
Yeah.
with you, like next to you, to see what it looks like? And the previs, I guess, is pretty accurate, but like still, it must.
It is
look,
pretty.
you know-
It's pretty accurate, but for colors, for certain colors, it's actually
Right.
not great. So I
Right.
do have it out, and I have. Yeah, it's cool that I can run both this view and like have it just send out on like Wi-Fi, just connect to the Wi-Fi router here on my PC, and then I can send it out and design the show with it just like on the ground.
Yeah,
next to me.
super cool.
Yeah, so I do a lot of that for the workflow, and then I render these videos out and then trigger them in a different setup. But yeah, I've had full shows like where just all of this is automation data, like the whole show. It's like a block of hours just automation.
Interesting.
So it can be pretty tedious, but it does look amazing when it's done.
Are you? Do you know what Vinay has done in that component?
Let me see. I know he was pretty particular about releasing it or like not having it like super publicly available. Yeah, it's password protected on this. model.
Ooh.
Oh wait, no, but I'm in.
Ooh.
Wait a minute. No, I'm not. Okay. I lied.
Look at
Yeah, it's password
him. I like
yeah.
it.
But it's not too complicated from what I remember. It's more just like we needed to know the particulars for how to send out the universe data, and he had to,
Right,
like, decipher that
right.
and count the numbers.
But
and
he
things.
wants to release it as like a component specifically for the suit. I guess it's like as a collaboration with the suit maker.
Maybe, yeah. I think he more actually the reason he password protected is just because a lot of things like this get like ripped in India for other styles of work in his history of like releasing stuff
Interesting.
with other artists. So I said, hey man, I'm not distributing it anywhere. I'm not putting it up anywhere, so you shouldn't really worry about it. But yeah, it honestly became a nuisance to have it password protected when we used to troubleshoot more. So he was just like, I'm gonna
I'm
use
sure.
the password. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's how the suit works. We spit out those videos, and then the live show, I'll show you quickly how the live show works back on my MacBook, actually.
Sure. I'm gonna switch back.
Because that's where I'm doing all those shows. Pull this back open. So, indulge 3. Let's open the Ableton. Let's save. And the touch. Yeah, so.
Must have been nice for you when TouchDesigner came out for the Mac, huh?
Oh my god, yeah, dude. It was.
Changed
It was
everything.
necessary. Yeah, finally I could like have all my stuff. I mean, I'm getting, dude. Funny enough, I'm getting into Beyond right now for lasers. I bought a Unity laser.
Oh, nice.
Which is I'm rolling my eyes because it's like, of course, I'm getting into more production when I really just need to like release music.
Oh, lasers are
But
cool.
yeah, lasers are great. So I'm intrigued by that, and with that you have to have a PC, like a separate laptop.
Yeah.
So I'm looking more into having that for performing. But
Nice.
okay, so this is similar looking layout, but the way the live show works is, I'll make this a little smaller because it's not as important. Well, let me just first start with this network. So it's the same thing where I'm importing macros, like the other projects, and a MIDI trigger to trigger the start of each clip. And those clips are here in the timelines. So the MIDI clips on the bottom are the suit triggers. You'll see like a tiny little MIDI note in these. And then this has automation data for which song is playing. This is track 30. This would be track 1, track 2, 3, 4. These go up more consecutively. And that macro of song selection is linked to this DAT, which is just selecting. These are all the individual movie files for the suit that I've made per song. And then those get triggered and output here and then sent back out to the same like interface we had before. And this was really cool. For Lightning in a Bottle, last year, we output this NDI on stage and we streamed it via Ethernet to front of house. And whatever happened on the suit, they mapped in Resolume to the lighting rig. And it looked awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really
everything was
cool.
synced.
Makes a lot of sense.
It was, yeah, like I talked to the guy beforehand and he was like, do you have like timecode data or what are you using for your suit? And I was like, Touch. He's like, oh, you should totally output the video input of that to Resolume and we'll stream it and then just sync it to the light rig. And it made the whole show like way more enhanced, which was really cool. So, yeah, but let me just play. This is my song that goes out to the vibraphone. We'll do this one. Shout out to the vibes. Actually, this is funny. I did include some of my AGT audition now that I don't need to worry about the legalities of it. There's this one little intro from AGT that's in the show. I'll play that first.
Nice.
People who make noise. And to make noise, you've got to be original. And to be original,
Oops, sorry.
wow. You've got to have good vibes.
And then this song kicks in, which is another artist song, actually, but this song's so good. Yeah. So that's the gist of how the show's run. Actually, funny enough, a lot of people are like, are you using Touch for outputting the visuals? And I was like, no, I'm literally just jank extending my HDMI, and this is Ableton's video viewer, and that just like goes over to the wall.
Really?
Or whatever. Yeah, dude.
Why?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Well, because it's more work to set up all these individual video files. Here's the other thing too. I can quickly edit the cuts in the songs. If I change up a song or cut it or like mess with it, I can just cut this portion of the show instantly and the visuals have that adjustment done. Versus if I was triggering individual videos in Touch, I wouldn't have the flexibility. Because for these shows, it's like, oh, my changeover was 15 minutes instead of 10. Now I have to cut something from my set a little bit.
I guess like if you're not doing like generative stuff, then it doesn't really matter where the video is coming from, right? It's probably just more makes it easier to do it.
Yeah,
like
this
that.
is just like again.
Oh, I lost you there for a
to have
second.
on a team at some point, but this is just like, oh, can you hear me?
I can. Yeah. What were you saying?
Hello? Okay. Yeah, I can probably, I guess just leave this open. But, yeah, these are all the songs up top in a show. And then this is the visuals, which is just MP4s for each song.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that's cool about this is you can scrub through the show, too, which you can't in Touch with a lot of features. So I can, quickly...
No, Touch is not, you're going to want to use Resolume for something like that, right? But then you're already getting into, more software and then the Touch Designer.
Right.
It's like a lot of things at once. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I've had a lot of trade-offs in designing it, but this is just like the quickest because I have such short changeovers, and then it's just like plug in the HDMI and go is like what I'm mostly doing right now. It's not like I have a sound check the day prior or anything like that. So it has. And to also,
now that I'm saying it, Resolume probably wouldn't be good for you either because it doesn't really have such a timeline interface. You'd have to kind of rely on. But what you could do with Resolume is you could have just triggering clips or just triggering decks. With
it could be this type of
each
setup.
Of your song. Yeah, just trigger.
Resolume. Yeah.
But
my dream is to have, and a friend of mine named Jensen, I think is his name. He's a Touch Designer guy. He does visuals for Dirtwire. Shout out to Jensen.
Nice.
Or Jansen. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. But he is working on a system. This dude's talk about goals, but I'm mostly trying to be a DJ and a musician, so I can't get too bogged down in it. But he's doing a MIDI track for each. He's got the backdrops for the LED wall. He's got live input MIDI from the performers triggering other visuals on top. He's got the stage lights on another MIDI reel from Ableton going to DMX, probably through, I don't know, Grand MA, maybe Touch. And then the fourth, he has lasers. So it's just all MIDI tracks in TD Ableton.
In Ableton.
Pretty much.
Wow.
For everything.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I was like, that is sick. That's what I want. So he actually sent me a config file for Beyond and Ableton, which was really nice of him.
Nice.
So
I was going to say, check out the episode I did with Spencer Sterling. He talks a lot about lasers and how he's using them.
Cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting. super
yeah, this
cool.
is
I mean,
a rough
it's
sense of how the show runs and then
it's
how the
so
content
interesting to
is made
see,
for
you
it.
know, how it's done, like, you know, behind the scenes. I really appreciate you sharing it with us.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing with the suit and the way that you arrange it is just awesome. I do like, you know, my touch designer brain is like, oh, I wish it was all generative and real time and everything. But then I'm thinking like, it doesn't really matter, because it's like a DJ set and you're kind of like, anyways, like the music's kind of just going through and it's your audiovisual show, so it doesn't actually, you know,
True.
have
Yeah.
that thing.
I do.
But then
I mean, I love the idea of more like, dude, improvising caters to my skill set too. That's why I want
improvising
to
for
make it more
sure.
real-time and generative. Yeah, yeah.
Improvising for sure would be interesting because then you would have more malleability. But really, where it gets interesting is, like when you're hitting the vibraphone,
Vibraphone.
then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know you can kind of use the amount of hit, you know, like the you know, whatever the
Velocity?
trigger is, if the velocity or like
Yeah.
the loudness or whatever, to then like make things more generative, that isn't just like a hit on like a, you know, a triggering a clip. You're actually like, how big is the ripple or how big is the thing, you know? And then it's like there's something about that kind of aspect that's like intriguing to me. I mean 90% of people don't know the difference, obviously, but like, you know, there's
Yeah.
have you ever heard of Brett Bolton,
Oh yeah. The drummer.
the drummer? Yeah. So like,
Yeah.
what I love
yeah,
about
love
his
work.
shows is not necessarily like, I mean, I love his visuals as well, but I just love when you see him like hit a drum and then, you know, the resonance of the drum is driving the visual. There's something in your head that's like, oh, is that like that? There's something in your head that's like connecting to it, you know, even for me, who's somebody's like understands how it works. So I think that it's the same aspect of like when you're hitting like a drum pad or a vibraphone or whatever, there's that aspect of like the way it kind of hits, you know. And I
Yeah.
you can definitely get the same effect from video, but I think that there's, you know, you're obviously and this is going to take us completely into another conversation. So before I go into it, was there anything else you wanted to show us?
Um, I think that's mostly it. We got through like an Ableton stash, the suit, the content for Life on Shuffle. Yeah, that's like mostly it. From what I wanted to showcase. Yeah, I think that's
Awesome.
a large part of it. Oh, the one thing I did want to say was, in terms of real time stuff, we are experimenting with doing more of that in the show. The thing is, like, to just go off what you were just talking about, I had a friend tell me this a long time ago when I first started getting into visuals. He was like, do not be surprised by how dumb the audience is for how simple the connectivity needs to be for them to understand what is happening on the stage. Like,
Yes,
dumb it
it's
down 200% of what you think it needs to be.
It's true.
Because you're a trained musician, your sense of time and rhythm is just like on a like different tier than most people's in the audiences. And like, yeah, sound to visual effect, unless it's like as clear as a movie, most people are not going to grasp that those things are related. And with how abstract a lot of visuals can be in TD, it's like you really need to make it super obvious. So Brett is someone who really succeeds in making his actions on the drum set directly responsive to stuff. And I love that about his work. My work, I do intend to do more stuff like that, I would say, down the road, especially with the suit, if we can get a more stable, like really durable version of it.
Well, so I was gonna say, like, you know, you're obviously very inclined and, you know, have some sort of notion of like frequency and like how that affects people, and that, like, you know, obviously as a neuroscientist, I'm sure you have even more of an understanding of it. And I believe, you know, and this is definitely going to get into our second portion here, that they're not only are they related, but they're like a tool for changing reality and changing people's vibe and energy and things like that. And I think that there is a lot to be said that when, you know, when you're getting the feedback of something in real time, quote unquote in real time, quote unquote in the moment, there's something in the energy of that, in the energy transfer of that, in the frequency transfer of that, versus something that's pre-recorded or predetermined or something like that. And I think that yes, the audience does not know the difference visibly. They don't know it audioly, right? If you're playing something live or if it's pre-recorded. But I think spiritually or esoterically or emotionally, whatever you want to call it, there is something to getting a frequency that is being made right now in the moment now, and getting something generative like lights and colors that is being generated now versus recorded. And I'm sure that people will argue with me about this, that this is the same thing. And I'm sure that there's probably evidence to show that they're the same thing. But intuitively, and just kind of like the way that I look at things, you know, spiritually, and sound healing is like one of those things that I can like speak up, because I've had a lot of sound healing experiences that have, you know, changed my life in some ways. And like the most effective ones have been with like a guy, a shaman, whatever you want to call them, a practitioner, like playing with the most weirdest objects, but the resonance of the object transcended me and took me into like the most psychedelic experiences, you know, that I've experienced. And that like kind of proves to me, or shows to me like anecdotally, that like it's not about the quality of the sound, or not even about like the arrangement of the sound. It's like the intention in the moment, in that place, in that time, and the frequency and the way it's being, you know,
that is something as a
given to
jazz
me.
musician I feel like my radar is very
Yeah.
good for inherently.
think-
And I also am irked by the idea that a lot of my show is time coded and sort of pre-rendered. I don't love that, especially because it doesn't suit my skills in the best way. Like my ability to perform my instrument rel, my ability to come in and have strong visions and be meticulous with visuals and time sync everything, those are clearly shown in my show right now. And then, as you said, I think I am fortunate that in the festival settings, I stand out just because I play a live instrument with my DJ set. And that brings the level of intention for people of like, this is happening in the moment. This is crazy.
Right.
This guy's like
Right.
a wizard kind of thing. That happens just because I have that. But also for me, like I said, I just enter. I mean, you saw how the show is made. There's so much time put into the development of the show that when I finally get on stage and all the load in of my heavy ass equipment, all the technicalities are sorted, everything's good to go, there's no time for BS. There's no room for bad energy.
Totally.
You have to get up there and just like I had someone come up to me after a show recently, and it might have been Electric Forest actually, so it was over the summer. But they came up to me after the show and they said that was nothing short of a religious experience. I truly
Hell
feel
yeah.
uplifted by your show. And I was
Amazing.
like, wow, that's the best kind of feedback I could ever get. Versus when I used to play more dive bars, it was like, you're really good at that thing, or like that xylophone is crazy, man. Like you
Right.
played a lot of notes, or you know, it's like
Right.
the
The
feedback is very
appreciation that
different.
people are having at these festivals is being like, it's resonating with you regardless of the modality or the way that you're doing it, right? So
Yes,
but
exactly.
I feel like
that's sort of channeling the frequency and higher energy is like, I think, so critical to people. And another thing I'll get is feedback, which is cool because I definitely have anxieties about how self-indulgent my project is. Like it's like I'm doing
Why?
all these things by myself. Or
okay.
like yeah, it just feels like most of my week is spent alone working on music, working on visuals, and then like preparing for shows. And so it's a lot of insular time. And I mean, everyone has doubts in their artistic process, but I think like another piece of feedback that I receive a lot from shows, which I'm so glad I decided to pursue this selfishly and like not be as with these bands and sort of have disagreements about how we want to brand things or perform things or anything like that. I am glad that I did the singular pursuit in this sense, because people will come up to me and say, clearly what you're doing no one else does, so it doesn't extend as clear a mimetic invitation. That's one thing I talked about a lot in school, the notion of a mimetic invitation, how easy it is to imitate something. Speaking to
Mimetic.
someone is a big like mimetic invitation, because you can hear someone say something and know exactly how you would say it yourself. Me playing the vibraphone in an LED suit, not everyone in the audience goes, oh yeah, I got that back
I
at
could do
home.
that.
You know,
Right.
like yeah, no one, right. So it doesn't extend the same mimetic invitation, but the invitation that it does extend is just energy. Like you're saying, like I am just up there having such a good time and outputting so much energy that it's really hard for people to not grasp a bit of that and start to move their bodies and feel compelled. But the other piece of feedback that I get too, which is my favorite, aside from the like spiritual thing, is just seeing your show tonight. I used to do this thing 2 years ago and I was really passionate about it, and then I got bogged down in this corporate job and like got married and like all these other logistics happened in my life, and just seeing your show tonight makes me like, tomorrow I'm gonna wake up
Inspired.
and I'm gonna do that thing that I haven't done in 2 years, and I'm like, dude, thank
Yeah.
you, you know, like
No,
that's what I want to be doing with my craft. Yeah.
Inspiring other people is definitely like getting the feedback that you inspired somebody is the best feeling ever, for sure, for sure, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So I think that a lot of what you're pointing at, and I think a lot of the reason that, regardless of the approach that you're taking, real time, time code, whatever, is your authenticity. You know, you're a very authentic person. Just having a conversation with you, and when we first met, you're very excited about what you're doing, and it comes from an authentic place, not of like a showing off place, but like of, I'm doing cool shit because like I know what's cool, and like I'm doing it. That's like a positive thing. It's not like, you're not doing cool shit to be cool. You're doing it because it feels good to you, and because you have a good eye and ear for what's cool. So, I think that it's a lot of times, especially for a person who's in front of people as a DJ, as a person who's on stage, to be authentic is difficult. You want to be the coolest person you can be, or whatever. Look, what I'm overusing the
Dude,
word
just
cool, but
doing it through the art form of DJing is also like, I'm so glad I don't have that problem. Like, there's
right.
tens of thousands of DJs that are amazing, and it's like,
Right.
do I turn this knob and look this way, or do I like? It's like,
Right.
dude, there's just
So-
way less opportunity for expression. I feel like in that art form.
100%. So, but even so, still being on stage, like how do you retain your authenticity? And as a person who's doing so many modalities, visuals, LEDs, lighting, music, and everything, how do you not lose track of what it is to be you, Matt, Plexus Play?
Yeah, really, really good question. That's that's what I'm still. I think I'm still figuring out, honestly. But I think
It's a
the
lifelong.
Yeah, and I think the main thing for me, or what has helped me a lot there, is, hilariously enough, it came from my mother, who works as a corporate, like, she works in pharmaceutical management and project management at like a startup. But she does these team bonding exercises with all the crap tons of money corporate companies have. They're like, but one of the exercises was identify, as a team relational thing, identify your top 5 values in life that like drive who you are as a person. And I like sort of scoffed it off, and then she sent me a list of the values, and I read, it was like 1,000 different values that are commonly shared. And you read through these and you're like, oh yeah, I can see how these like really matter different amounts to people. And I picked out 5, and it's really helped me hone in decisions on what to prioritize in my show, who I am as a person, and how that needs to come through the show, and how the show serves as a vehicle for that, rather than just like, it's this thing that I don't really tangibly understand, and I'm like working on and sort of spewing out music and media occasionally from. But for me, having an understanding of my values made a really, really big difference there. And those being communication. So I really like interactivity, engaging the audience, giving them permission. I think a lot about how presentational a show is versus how participatory a show is. And when I played jazz, it was much more of this starting to get institutionalized, skill-based thing that people would just sit down and go, that's crazy. But I much more wanted to engage people and impact them and have them move their bodies. And so communication was a big way that I did that, both nonverbal and verbal, just on the mic. The intro to the show also is it's like, embrace your inner weirdness, like, dare to take this journey, find new friends in the audience. Like, there's all these just like, this is this safe space to be yourself. And it really sets that as the precedence before the show even starts and I get on stage. It's like a whole movie that plays that's 2 minutes long. And it just sets the thing of like, we're setting a container to be yourself and just move your body and have fun with your friends. And like, that's what this is all about. And staying engaged. So communication, excitement is like the second, it also relates to like play in my name, I guess. A Plexus Play. But excitement is really key for me. What like keeps me motivated with my work, and I am a person that, as you probably are too, just people who get into visuals, I think, innately have a strong desire for stimulation, especially festivals too. Like, there's sonic, visual, like food, there's everything at festivals, movement, like yoga. It's just a full stimulation of the senses. So I really love that, and I need that just with how high energy I am as a person. Other ones being like learning. Obviously, that's really important to me with how many different things and different modalities I've gone into. And the other two are grace, which both translates to being giving and forgiving to your local community, as well as just movement for me, which is really important to my show. And last one is reflection, which I think is really undervalued in the festival types of scenes and visuals and DJs. It's like you go to these crazy, almost escapism environments for a lot of more people who just do this one festival a year. It's like this big formative thing for them. But for us, it's just another weekend out on the job, you know?
Right.
And you deal with these polarizations. It's like hyper social. And I'm doing a show for 400 people and
You're
everyone wants to come
hyper-focused.
talk. And I'm
Yeah.
hyper focused. And then you get home and it's like, all right, I got like 2 weeks until the next thing. Like I got to like sit down and bunker through it. But anyways, I find reflection is so imperative on the day-to-day to have a routine. I'm really into cold plunging, actually, just because it is a neurological consistency thing that I do most days of the week, 5 days of the week. I get in this freezing cold tub of water, and my whole body has this like relaxation associated with that before an accomplishment. Because, you know, evolutionarily, your brain's like, yo, we're dying, get out of here, get out of here. And you get out, and it's like, oh, we made it, we're alive. Like, your brain's literally sending signals to, like, dude, we made it through the crazy thing. So,
Wow.
yeah, I find I have to do those regulations and those reflections on just, like, what went well today, what went well at this show, what could be better, and, like, journaling. All those things I haven't been doing as much with a crazy November that I had. But that's really important to me, staying healthy as an artist. And I think that's a big part of what I need to be the most authentic me, which is sort of like circling back to answering your question.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, I mean that's awesome. I really relate to that. Not to, not really. Let me rephrase that. I really appreciate that your connection to authenticity and kind of like all the things that you're doing to kind of stay in that place. You know, it shows, you know, so you should be happy and proud of yourself in that sense, because it really does come out. Is it hard to keep track of all of the things that you're doing, like all the modalities? Is it hard to, like, you know, you're talking about the lasers now, and you obviously have an idea to upgrade the suit. Is it hard to, something that I ask a lot of people is like, how do you know what to learn next? How do you know what to focus on next? I think for you, it's like a compounding thing, it seems like. So is there any like tip or trick that you kind of implement to know what to kind of focus on and keeping track of everything?
Yeah. I think it's equally as important to have a deadline or something that you're working towards, like a show or a graduation or whatever you're doing creatively with your work or your time in life. I think having a goal is really important, just with how the human brain works. Dopamine, man. Like you charge, a show is like the biggest dopamine rush. It's better than any drug I've ever done. Not that I do a lot of drugs, but just like it's just the best feeling to perform and put in all that effort into a show, and then just like cathartically have the experience shared with people. But in terms of managing many interests, it is very hard. It is something I struggle with. I've definitely been through many phases of burnout in my career. I think for me, the guiding light is, it's a balance of, I have these long-term goals. Like when I got into TouchDesigner, I was like, I know, given my interest to make a very interdisciplinary thing, that this tool will be very useful to me. And I'm willing to show up 2-3 days a week and watch tutorials and recreate the tutorials and just like spend the time in the networks and like get familiar with the interface. And that's paid off huge. Like the last 2 years have been awesome with the suit and these other types of shows and formats that I've been creating. So the long-term balance with a short-term goal, I think, is the best, because you can be accruing those skills and then watching them manifest at the same time. You have to have those two things like kind of happening in parallel, I think, for me to be healthy. And yeah, in terms of work-life balance, man, I mean, I've definitely received a decent amount of feedback from people in my life of like, how much do you work? But it's definitely like a love and a passion for me. But I think if I'm not performing, it really affects my mental health. Like I could not be the person that just produces shows remotely for people all day and like sends them out. I have to be giving the experience to people, and that's just part of who I am as like an extroverted social person. I typically plan out my month at the beginning of a month. I say like, I'd like to learn these things. I'd like to complete these larger projects and release this content on this schedule. And I'll often shoot content in batches too, for what it's worth, because everyone out here on this channel who's watching probably manages some form of content stream. Or just like stuff to put out. And the visual world, I think it's kind of nice because you can just select different music and just sort of send it out. But for me, I'm doing everything as these like full cohesive productions, so it's always a lot of work. Yeah, but I think to answer your question, to manage a lot of things, I think a really bird's eye view of it for me is that where I'm at right now is I'm known as this like kind of wizard guy that does a lot of different stuff. I want to be known first and foremost as a musician and a producer and a DJ who knows these other skills to help produce the show out. And that and in that sense, my background is I have such an emotional attachment and a spiritual attachment to music and my performance of the music that all the production just comes downstream of the music being good. So I start with that, and I haven't prioritized that, as I was saying, as much in the last 2 years, developing TouchDesigner workflows, show workflows, suit, all those things, visuals. Yeah, I haven't been releasing music in the way to make that the first thing people think about when they see me and my face. So I'm working towards changing that a little bit. But I do know that the music is what drives everything for me. And then management of it just comes with month to month. And again, like doing the reflections of what's working, what's not, being in touch with those feelings, I think is very important as an artist. One thing, an artist who's very influential to me, Jacob Collier, much more like a jazzy, nerdy kid out there, but he talks about this notion of your internal weather when you wake up as a creative person. What is your like internal forecast, with the notion that, you know, our monkey brains are not totally predictable. You can't just say, I'm happy today, you know, like, and like go to work. You wake up and you're like, oh, that concert I went to last night is sitting with me and feels amazing. And I feel really great today. And, or like, I got in an argument with my sister yesterday and I feel like crap today. You know, like you have to like gauge that and be present with it and mindful of it, I think, to be effective in your work, because you have to have I'm rambling a little bit here, but one final thing I want to say is like, I think the concept of gentle ruthlessness is something I really, really have stuck
with
to
yourself
over the last 4 years. Yes, the gentle happens on the day-to-day. You have to be gentle with yourself as a human being. You're a human being.
Right.
You know, people say like you're like a plant. You need water and sunlight. There's like these basic fundamental human needs you have to tackle. But the ruthlessness comes with the long-term goals and your ambitions and what I want for my show. I want to be like working full time, just doing performing, like that's it. No other teaching, no other anything. Those have been pretty set goals for me for a long time. And I definitely think I could think a little bit smarter about getting to that. I'm also planning to release a lot of passive assets on my website soon. Like I made 50 TD Ableton systems for animating that are just going to come out as like a sample pack kind of equivalent
That's
thing.
awesome.
So yeah, but managing a lot of things is hard. I definitely have phases of
Burnout.
Not too much burnout, I would say, but I need to like, I know when I need to go on like a 10-mile trail run in the mountains, and that happens like
Damn,
often
10-mile trail run, dude. What the
yeah,
hell?
dude. Are
you like? Do you train a lot?
No, but I just genetically have. I run around my neighborhood a lot, and there's hills, so I stay in pretty good shape. I run like, I'm either running or shuffling most days of the week. I'll shuffle for 30 minutes to an hour, dude. That is the best workout I've ever found.
I can imagine.
Straight up, it's like so. It's not only
intense.
It's better for training your running muscles too. All the fine motor that you need to strengthen to do all the pivoting and stuff and control your motion. It's like it's the best way to train to do distance running. I used to have issues going above like half marathons, like 15, 16 miles. I used to start to get knee injuries and stuff. And now I don't have it since I've been shuffling, so it's kind of silly. But yeah, I need the nature, and I know when I need to get out and just like go on a long ass run to clear my head.
Totally. Yeah, going out to the nature is one of the most important things. I love it so
you
much.
Understand
that I moved,
that being out there, dude.
Yeah,
I mean,
I moved out here for that reason. You know, that was like kind of. I always try to live in the nature. You know, when we first moved to the States, we lived in Pasadena, and it's like not, you know, it's suburban, it's beautiful, it's really nice, but like there was always this moment of just like, oh, I need to go, like you said, I need to go for a hike, I need to go for a walk. And then I get there and I'm in the nature and I'm like, oh, like I'm a different person all of a sudden. Like all the things that I needed to come out here for just don't matter. They're not like important, or they do matter and I realize them. And, you know, it's just, I just love, I love living in that. And, you know, having that as like my baseline, it like helps me so much in so many aspects of my life. I know it's not right for everybody, but it just, for me, it really helps me. So
yeah, I mean, it's a pretty fundamental part of our being too, being in touch
totally
with this stuff. Like
Totally,
it's
totally.
just so innate, and I think it's so important nowadays with attention being this like crazy commodification in America especially, or just around the world really. But it's so critical to go back to like your hunter gatherer instincts, man.
Yeah.
Like we were not meant to look at anxiety bricks like half the day,
Totally.
like
Yeah,
2
yeah,
feet
yeah.
from our face.
And
So,
you know,
yeah.
you forget, you know, I could talk about this forever, but you could forget that when you're in the city or when you're around other people in a dense population, and I'm also in pretty dense population here in Lake Arrowhead, but the difference is that we're all in the nature densely together, so there's like a different vibe. But when you're around tons of people, especially in the city where the mentality is different, you're not noticing, but you're being affected by everybody's energies all the time. You know, energies resonate outwards, and you're kind of like, if you're in an apartment building or if you have a lot of neighbors, or if even if you just walk down the street to the coffee shop, you're being affected by a lot of things around you. And we don't remember that that is not natural, right? That's not necessarily normal. Like, even as like even in an esoteric sense of this, like, you know, somebody in front of line of you, or you know, somebody walking down the street is a dick, you know, in back in the day, you would, okay, you don't choose the tribe you're born into, but the tribe that you're in are all kind of like, you're all kind of working together to not die, right? And like in the city, there's not really that sense. You're all kind of like working together to not, for you not to die, right? Or you're whatever, you're all working together, you know, especially in some cities, it's like you're not even doing that. You're just kind of hustling or rat racing or whatever. And I think that that's really important to kind of like remember, you know, that you're kind of just, it's like the nature is baseline. There's no good or bad in nature. Nature is not, doesn't have emotions, or doesn't have like, you know, the capability to like think of like positive or negative. It just is, right? Like an animal kills another animal because, and a tree falls because, and the fire starts because. There's no is, like why, you know? And I think that we get so stuck up into like bad and good, and like, you know, my feelings are good and bad, and how do I do it? And like, really at the end of the day, like, what is like the whole wellness idea is like be in the moment, right? Why? Because the moment doesn't have good or bad, it just is. And nature kind of reflects that to you. And then when you're
I've never
when you're
thought of it
being,
as like a homeostasis regulation.
it is,
That's a great
it
way to
really
put it.
is. And that's why I think that when you're in the nature, it's a lot easier to think, because, you know, like you said, reflection, right? It's all about reflection. You're like, your energy is kind of like your energy that you're outputting is essentially a reflection of the energy that's being fed into you, right? Like if you're around good people all the time, you're going to feel good and you're going to release good stuff. And if that's fluctuating or changing, then it might be difficult to compartmentalize it. Some people can, some people can't, right?
Right.
And then, you know, that's going to snowball and it's going to affect. And then maybe it's not even external, it's just internal. You're feeling bad, and that's what you're expressing outwards. Now, if your reflection is like baseline homeostasis, like you're saying, this baseline nature, then you're going to output bad, you're going to output good, but what's going to come back is just calm, is. And that's going to help you reset and be like, okay, is the bad feeling that I'm feeling legitimate or helping me, or where is it coming from? You know, it's kind of like a therapy session, right? Like of like, for me, therapy is always like not about like what the therapist is saying, but it's about hearing myself talk about these things, and then like, okay, I get it, you know. And it's like, that's what nature does for you, for me, you know, is like, what am I feeling? Why? Look at how beautiful this is right now. Oh, look at the tree. Oh, look at the, you know. And then you kind of just like, all of a sudden everything's kind of like a lot more sensible, or makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it's interesting how all the thoughts in your mind, when you have a moment of peace and openness in a larger space, they sort of just like seep out of you into the existential vastness, but not in a negative sense. It's like, these can finally have a place to go where my mind isn't like walking down my hallway in my house thinking about what I'm about to do next. It's like, no, I'm just out here.
Or just like being affected by all the things in the city, good and bad, you know, like, and again, good and bad, right? Like, obviously seeing all the homelessness is bad, but then going to a party is really fun and really good, but it might not be what you need in the moment. Or like you said, like it might be that all you need right now is just the expansiveness, kind of just like nothingness, right? To kind of then understand, okay, I want to go to. That's a big reason why when we lived in Israel, I met my wife in the city in Tel Aviv, and then we were going like every weekend to these friends in the north of Israel, and like they were living in like rural area. They were artists, you know, and we would just kind of like went there and just did tons of drugs and partied like all weekend. And we're like, every time we drove home, we're like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense that we're going back to the city, all depressed and all sad, and like and then we're coming to the nature and having the best time of our life. And it was like, wait a second, let's just switch this around. Let's live here, and then if we want to go to the city for whatever reason, we can, you know.
Nice.
And it was like a very big switch. And I know that not everybody can do that. And like, I'm very grateful for the time that I spent in the city, to have a career, to find my wife. Like, there was a lot of things, but at some point it just clicked of like, I don't have to leave the city. I can get everything from it. But when I go home, I want to go to the place that I'm going to be the most, have the most fun, be the most calm, and then go there for the day trip. You know what I mean? Instead of vice versa.
Yeah.
So, are you good with time? Are we?
Yeah, I think I'm good till I have probably till like 7:15. I checked in with the
Okay.
group there.
So
It's getting
we
started,
can.
so-
I have two more. I think topics that I think would be interesting.
Yeah.
So you play jazz, kind of like, you know, you have. I don't know if you're in a jazz band or anything like that, but I know that you play kind of like as a freelancer, and kind of like, you know, you're in a jazz environment, and obviously you're trained. You know, the flow state that you must get when you're playing jazz is probably almost like required, right? Like, you need to be in some sort of flow state to be able to like jazz, right? Like, to be able to do it. I kind of like relate it to like almost like dancing, like not dancing in an ensemble, but like dancing like in a party, right? Like, the more flow you're in, like the more your mind's not working and you're just kind of like enjoying, the more you're gonna dance
yes.
cool, you know, like the more you're gonna get into your groove.
This
So,
is
like,
neurologically backed too, by the way.
I know,
If we're gonna
yeah,
go
for
full
sure.
full nerd on it, but
give me it. What is it like? What does it
so
say to you?
It's so your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That was a mouthful, but dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Your frontal cortex in your brain is responsible for all the executive functionings. It's also responsible for like higher order thinking, and so like consciousness. And your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex here on the sides of your frontal cortex is responsible for self-monitoring. So how do I look? Does my date think I look good, or do I look good while I'm dancing, or am I performing well? Like, how's the show going? All those internal thoughts are dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and they find that with jazz improvisers and rappers, freestyle rappers, they've put them into MRI machines. Those areas of the brain receive less blood flow during peak moments
Those
of
moments,
improvisation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you're thinking less about how you sound because you're so present with creating and being the sound.
Wow. So, okay, can we like think about this for a second? Is there like a device that you can make that would stop the blood flow going to that area, or like a
Whoa.
or
I
like
hadn't
a
thought
drug,
about
or like something, and then you could like give it to everybody that comes into the party, so everybody could just like not think about the way they look or whatever.
Sure. I mean, yeah. Well, I don't know about it. I'm sure
This
some
guy-
psychedelics have an effect on the dorsolateral prefrontal
Oh,
cortex in general.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You're like, my research has shown. I can 100% confirm. These
No,
parties
no,
outside
I-
of Tel Aviv, dude. I'm telling you. No. No, but yeah, I totally feel you on the sense of you need to be not monitoring and so present with that. And the way I've done it is like that. My training has given me really strong emotional associations with different, like music. Frankly, like even the intervals. Like, can you hear? Let me see if I can just play. Even like the intervals on a piano, which I can also pull up this if there's this screen share still happening. But
Yep.
just make this bigger. Yeah, so even the basic intervals have like strong emotional associations. Oh, yeah, there we go, the MacBook. Let me make this even bigger then. Okay, yeah. So like to me, and this goes as complicated as like chords and modes too, but if you just start with intervals, like with how harmonic resonances work, when I hit this note on the piano, C, there is an inherent overtone C, G, C, and E ringing harmonically, all within this note. That's
like
on
an
the EQ.
undertone.
overtones, technically. Yeah. So the
Overtone?
fundamental
Okay.
frequency, if we look at the EQ, that's actually the best way to see it. So the EQ here, this is the fundamental frequency. If I filter out all the high stuff, I'll change this to.
This
And if I
is
filter out all these
fucking
highs,
awesome.
this is just a fundamental. That's a sine wave, right? The first fundamental, you bring it in, it's another octave, and then that has the ooh, the fifth, another octave, and now you hear a bit more ooh as you bring in the high overtones. So all these overtones relate to the timbre of the sound and the fact that we know this is a piano versus a cello. That's how the distribution of overtones work. But that is why an octave creates a feeling of stability as well as a fifth. That sounds stable,
Is
defined.
that a chord together?
This is a dyad, technically. I would think of a chord as
Okay.
like 3 or more.
Okay.
That's like a chord to me. But
Okay,
that's
okay.
why this is one of the most consonant sounds you can have. So that's why it's pleasing to the ear.
Uh-huh.
And if you play more dissonant sounds, much more high tension, you get a much more like internal. That's because the overtones of those notes don't relate as much in terms of resonance.
Why?
So-
Why does that? What is the function of that? Like, 'cause,
Yeah. It's tension
right,
and
like-
release in music, man. Like that's, but I think of all of these, even like I've developed individual emotional associations with each interval. So like this feels like warm and round to me. This feels nostalgic and a little bit longing,
Interesting.
a major seventh. And then like if you go to modes, like full scale modes. So this is like the major C major scale. This is Lydian, which is even brighter. It's what a lot of cartoon music is written on. It sounds like sharp, angular, and exciting. Like,
Interesting.
and like, you know, like the Link and all these video game themes are very related to Lydian. So like,
Interesting.
that's bright. And then you can go to really dark modes. If you go really dark, you have minor. More like sultry and like moody. And you can go even darker than that with Phrygian. This is what a lot of punk music is written in. Much more sinister.
That sounds like
and those
a
are all with
Nirvana
reference.
chord.
Yeah. And then in cartoons, you have like, you know, when people laugh, like, you know, like there's all these expressions and chords that you can use in different functions.
So-
But anyways, sorry,
but-
I'm getting sidetracked.
But it's no. This is fucking awesome. Like we should have done this from the beginning. Like the chicken or the egg situation here, right? Like, what like is it the sounds that are like having these emotional responses, or is it like because of the way like that we have our culture, then these are eliciting these triggering responses? Like cavemen in a cave singing, were they like, oh, if I sing ha, then everybody's happy, and if I sing ha, you know, like what's the fucking like what's the mechanism here? Like obviously bird songs and like, you know, a storm crashing and like the waves hitting the ocean, like they must all have this resonance that you're talking about, right? And each one has like their thing, but like what is the like what's the evolutionary aspect of this, right? And like why?
Okay, well, the reason we were developed to have such, the reason we developed such strong senses of detecting timbre, which is like the sound quality, how harsh it is, how round it is, how smooth it is. The reason we developed those is to distinguish voices better. I know my mother's voice because the timbre of it is extremely unique, how my mother's overtones in her vocal cords are formed. That's why we developed that. But in terms of like, when you said waves crashing is a lot of like white noise. So like if you just take, which you're probably familiar with noise because you do visuals and stuff. But if
Well,
you just
also I have
take
a
like,
baby. White noise is very important.
right, yeah, exactly. If you just take white noise and filter it, you basically get a wave. Like, and it's cool that these notions of like, yeah, here, let me just pull up any, if I have Serum up, I can make some white noise really quick and then just mess with it. But if you have, let's see, yeah, take this off, anything like that, or maybe there's like a better bright white. Yeah. So EQ wise, this is like noise is just all frequencies played at once, which you're probably familiar with. That's why on the EQ you just see craziness everywhere. There's not these peaks deliberately. If I take one of these peaks and I emphasize it like really narrow, like this, you'll hear a note. Oh, it's pretty subtle right now, but there's a very
Yeah, I
don't
hear
know if you
that.
can hear that sweeping up.
That's
yeah,
wild. I never knew that before.
Yeah.
Can you
so
emphasize that
this
even further? Can you emphasize that even further?
Yeah, I
That's
can put another point at the same
crazy.
frequency. Hold on. Yeah, and then we need to move them in parallel, so we have to select both, I think.
Wait, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah,
No?
so
That's crazy.
yeah. Anyways, but if you just take this peak and you do more of something like this with it, where you just filter out all the lows. Or I actually need just like an auto filter to do this really quick, better for you. But like this is how so many sounds in nature work. They take like the chaos of like the world and they filter it. So like low wind and stuff is just like
Like
that's noise and just a
it's
filter.
just noise on the thing. Like a
I'm
peak
just filtering out. Yeah, it's just filtering out only the low ends and sweeping them.
Wow. Well, it does kind of
Yeah.
speak to visuals because like a noise is literally
Right.
like the pattern of a wind or whatever the fractal
Yeah,
nature
yeah.
of something, and then if you like zoom into like one area of it, right, or zoom out of one area of it, it's like it changes the way it acts and reacts.
Totally.
Very interesting.
But yeah,
I never thought
I think of
about
it as
that.
all as like I do think a lot of one thing I think a lot about as an electronic music producer is if you go back to the notion of that mimetic invitation, how much you're inviting someone to participate with something.
Mm-hmm.
Like the drums and the vocals really do all of that in electronic music. But the other things, they sort of are trying to immerse you in this fantasy world that just seems like, not human or like a different universe. But one other thing that I really appreciate about even EDM design, like take a super saw, for example, which is made by taking a saw wave like this, and you create multiple of them. Will increase the voices a bunch. And if you don't have detune, it sounds very pure, and then you add the detune. Adding detune in this case makes it sound bigger and louder. What you're doing is you're adding slight variations in the pitch. There's even an effect called chorus that is dedicated towards making things sound more organic, like a choir of voices that all have subtle pitch inflections and timbre inflections, a choir of people. So the reason it's called a chorus is because it duplicates the signal and it slightly shifts the phase and
Shifts the
pitches.
phase.
And that creates a more organic feeling from something that is strictly so digital.
Like
formed
that,
from a
like
line
it's
like this.
natural to hear something that's like a core, like
That's
like
that
a
has
resonating-
variation.
Has variation.
It's natural to hear something that has slight impurities, right? That's what the
Mm-hmm.
world has. When you experience it's, you never hear a sine wave when I walk out my door in LA. You'll never hear that. It's all complex waveforms and complex sounds. So it's funny how even with EDM, you're like seeking to take something that sounds so basic on its own
Right.
and make it sound much more organic and large by adding variation and impurities. So yeah.
Okay, so
that's another thing I
chicken
thought.
or the egg? Like, what is it? Is it like because we're, because like whatever, our ancestors listened to Mozart and went to like opera houses or whatever the fuck, and like we were watching cartoons, that those things resonate, or is it like Mozart and the sound designers for the cartoons know how to like utilize the thing that creates like the implicit reaction?
I think that the chicken and egg. Well, I think I think as a scientist, as a person who comes from all the background of the technicalities, I'm like, yeah, your temporal lobe in your brain is organized by pitch. If you stimulate portions of your temporal lobe going this way, you go lower in pitch on the frequency spectrum, and you can you'll have auditory hallucinations when you stimulate the brain open. If the like brain is open and you can stimulate it with an electrode, you'll literally get hallucinations of sound. And so in that sense, I believe it's the consonance of the frequencies, because you see this outside Western music too, just things that sound consonant versus dissonant in the overtones, create those senses of harmony or dissonance. And music is really all about tension and release, whether it happens rhythmically or whether it happens with a chord or a melody note. All those things are just building up anticipation. So like, if I just walk away, people are like, no, what, the last note, I need that,
Right.
like, you know, the final thing. So just driving and playing with those expectations, I think a lot is what it comes down to for me. And knowing the science of doing that. But I love when students write from their intuition and come to me and they're like, I don't know what I just wrote, but it's cool and it makes me feel this way. That's always really cool to see that there's an innate understanding of those tendencies, where I think it's nice when I can turn off my analytical brain listening to music. I can't really do that because I've just been through this ringer
Because you've
of
been
like,
so, yeah, well, that's for
yeah,
sure. That's
like cannabis helps me turn it off for sure. Like just sit down and listen to music more. It's just like as if I'm at a show. Being at a show
Nice.
definitely helps too. Just like having other immersive
People
parts of the experience.
around, like,
yeah,
yeah.
people around. And sorry, that led me to the second thing I wanted to say, which is I think so much of our perception, at least in the music world, is social, and probably in the visual too. Like when I first came across that band Nowhere, that changed my life and changed the way I wanted to look at making shows that I spoke about earlier. First time I saw a video of them, I didn't pay it any mind, and I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool. And then next week, my friend showed, yo, we got to bring these guys with the organization. Like, they sound so good. Like, check them out. And then I started watching more of their videos. And it was literally just the social impact of one of my best friends being like, this is great art, that led me to be obsessed with them. Like, I might not have done that. I look back and I'm like, I might have never brought them to school if my
Interesting.
friend hadn't done that. So I think the
Super
social influence, I'm a very people pleaser type of person, very social. So I think that has a huge impact on how you perceive different things. But there are innate resonances and dissonances in the way we structure Western music that I think
Interesting.
do most of the heavy lifting. Yeah.
Do you know? I'm gonna totally butcher it, but there's like a concept in like Eastern music, like an Indian culture, that relates to like every chord relates to a different chakra, and like every chord has like there's like a name for it. I need to like just quickly search it because it's like actually very interesting. A good friend of mine, Mantis Smash, he actually wrote the intro and outro for this podcast. Well, he didn't write it for the podcast, but I use his music.
Cool. Nice.
He like studied a lot of Eastern music, and and he was just telling me about it. It's called Eastern music ladder. What is it? It's called.
It's not Hindustani or Carnatic. Those are the different styles of Indian music, I think. But
Maybe, and its relation to each. Fuck it, I can't find it. I'll have to find it another time. But yeah, it was just very interesting. It was like, oh no, what it was related to the time of the day, the time
oh,
of day,
That's
like
cool.
to the cycle of the day. No, I can't find it either. Okay, whatever. Anyway, it was very interesting about how like the music is like different parts of, or different notes or different chords. I don't know the exact time, like the exact thing of it, but like they're related to different parts of the day, like the evening and the morning and I guess those are also connected to the chakras because of like, you know, the way that the earth is turning around. But it was just super interesting to kind of like hear about that, how like the different, you know, and this kind of leads me to the last thing I want to talk about with you. And we kind of talked about it a little bit, but, you know, I want to get into a little bit of a more broader conversation about it. But like the idea of sound healing and like the way that, you know, different frequencies can affect simple things like just, you know, I'm sure you've seen like a somatics, right? Like how they kind of create beautiful patterns. There's been a lot of research, or not a lot, but there's been research about like, you know, playing different frequencies to plants and how that affects the plants, and then the water, like, you know, that's maybe like a little bit foo-foo, but like, you know, the way that you can play a different frequency to water, and then the minerals and the way that they organize maybe changes the way that the molecular structure of the water, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah.
You know, and again, like I kind of mentioned it, but like sound healing has been very influential to me. Do you kind of, what do you think about that? And like, do you have like some sort of spiritual or esoteric kind of like put your scientific brain aside for a second, and like, you know, how do you kind of relate to the resonation and different frequencies of music? And have you seen them kind of be you know, impactful in the way that you do your shows, or in, you know, in the audience and things like that?
Yeah, I think, well, I want to preface this with saying that I'm not as researched in the sound healing domain, and people ask me, they're like, can you do a sound healing? Can you do a sound bath? And I don't really identify or market myself as a person that does that, but my instrument is very inherently good at doing that.
Because
It's
of
very
the
relaxing.
the vibration. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's just such a beautiful thing to hear in isolation by itself, and witness like in person too, in the room, hearing the vibrations. So, it is very useful for, and like very it lends itself very well to that scene. I think I've always been more drawn because of my training with music theory to go with the Western approach and the knowledge of music theory and how like just like full chords more like affect your sense of tension and release than specific frequencies. But I'm very intrigued by that work and that research. I have a friend here, Torkom is his name, Torkom G. He is a really great sound healer here in Los Angeles, and he works with dome experiences and like very immersive settings usually.
Nice.
Yeah, he's great. I recommend checking him out, as well as the Creative Technology Center. They have a lot of infrastructure for that kind of work there.
That's where you were
in
doing.
LA.
That's where you shot your.
That's where I shot the video too. Yeah. I feel very
Nice.
blessed that I got to do that because it's a pretty selective space. But yeah, I think my relation to the spiritual. I will say this. I use music a lot for emotional regulation. That's like the main thing. Reason I think I love music so much is like just different moods and different times of days and different energies and different mindsets you want to occupy. I drive a lot of that with music. And I listen to monophonic chant a lot, funny enough.
Like what is that? Like throat
Like,
singing? No. Oh, okay.
Just like
Yeah.
slow single, like it's like 20 dudes singing one
Beautiful.
melody, no harmonies.
Beautiful.
And it's super reverberant cave kind of like concert hall setting. Yeah,
Sick.
it's I listen to that a lot in the shower and like sometimes when I meditate, and it just like totally helps me relax. I think that kind of stuff is so important to engage with. I haven't engaged, there's certain people, I've spoke with my friend Torkom about this. Torkom, I think is his pronunciation of his name, but he's all like, there's so many people that agree that this frequency does one thing, this frequency does
Right.
another. and there's, like, this
432,
frequency for this.
etc. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's kind of like, dude, every human is different, and I kind of think that theory is bullshit. I think there's validity to certain frequencies being more relevant than others, but he doesn't assign a frequency to have a function on a specific person. Just like you can't
Interesting.
say like, I don't
This
know, seeing
food
this
or
movie
that
is
food.
is gonna affect a person totally differently.
No,
based on
everybody's
their
different.
Personal experience. So, but I really do believe that, I go back to this, I think I said this earlier, the mysticism of music, the fact that it is an intangible thing and we can't see it, but it has such an impact on us. I think that magnifies the sense of magic and what the frequencies can do and how they can affect your body. And I can say on a just, this is one other thing I'd really love to, we don't have time to dive into it, but there's this, my professor from Oberlin had this thing called it was the acoustic auditory fact, and it's really interesting. It's like there's 8 avenues of musical affect, and then there are like 5, I think it was 5 variables within music that you can focus on, and together it's just so fascinating. Together that 8, the row of 8 being like acoustic impact, which is like if you think about cinematic movie trailers, just like the that starts a movie trailer and you're like, oh, right? Like that is the notion of acoustic impact. The notion, like you have different variables like that, and then you have the variables of like harmony, melody, pitch, timbre, and rhythm or something like that. And together that creates a grid of 40 different ways that you can analyze any given piece of music or sound. And
Really?
that was just so, because it's like the 8 avenues of like how impactful is it to me, how like harmonious does it sound. I can't remember the 8 avenues of musical affect, but then cross-referencing those with the different variables within music, like rhythm, melody, timbre, like tone, and you just get like so many different ways of thinking about the same piece of music. That really opened up a lot of ways that I think about how music impacts me. And therefore just I have such an emotional relationship to listening to music. But spiritually speaking, I do believe that there is an energy that connects a lot of living things that is definitely metaphysics. Like it's a big it's something that we are still very much understanding and just scratching the surface of. I think in the physics world, there's a lot of discoveries still to be made. But I agree with that. I'm not as, I was raised Catholic, and I can't say I like believe in this one entity that's constantly spying on me in the sky. And that's fine. Like we don't need to get into religion, but I do believe in the notion that people are connected through their energies, and I really try and channel higher energies and exciting energies for people, and encourage them. I really believe in the mantra of like encourage and be encouraged, and like you get what you give kind of thing, and I being cis white male raised in like nice suburbia, having a lot of education and resources at my disposal, I think it is my duty in that sense to not be not being bogged down by many other things potentially in my life that I've been privileged to experience. Like it is my duty to work extremely hard at what I'm doing and bring great energy and encouraging like mindsets towards anyone that I'm interacting with. I mean, that's just like, that's what my calling is and what I have to do. Otherwise,
Totally.
I don't know what else would I do.
Yeah, you don't have to be cis white male to do that. I think everybody should do
True,
that.
true, totally, yeah.
And it's also not your fault that you're cis white male. You were born that way. You can't help it.
Fair. Yeah.
But I appreciate what you were saying for sure, and I think you're totally right. It's like what other. I always think about it like this, like, and this is definitely maybe too spiritual and like foo-foo, but like, what's the point of really being here in this world and this universe and like in this physical body, right? Like the idea of a soul, the idea of like the afterlife, whatever, irrelevant, to the concept of like, you're here for a reason. You're here for a very small moment in time in relative. And you have the opportunity to A, impact so many people around you, and B, yourself. Like, we have all this, and this is scientific, right? We have, generational trauma that is affected in our DNA. They've researched that. We have, ancestral kind of like, cis white male, black person, whatever, Indian person, woman, whatever. All of these things kind of compact, family history, ancestry, all these things compact, and then you're you with all of that past stuff. I also add to it like past lives and like, reincarnation. I don't know how it works exactly, but I add to it. And then it's like, okay, well, the reason that I'm here at this time, in this moment, is to fix or change or alter or transmute all those things inside of me so that maybe when I come back, or even while I'm here right now, I can do the same for others, or I can impart that transmutation and I can become a better person so that my better person will make the world better, right, in the time that I'm here. And I think that that's just like kind of like, doesn't have to do with religion, doesn't have to do with belief. I think it's just like a kind of a simple, easy, and positive way of looking at things.
This leads me to like the notion that everyone's wellness is sort of an equation that they're constantly balancing. And when you can feel aligned in your best sense there, and it's something will change within the week that causes that out of alignment. The baby will scream, or something will happen. But like you have this equation, and when you are, there's this, and everyone experiences this. There's like a potency when you are firing on all cylinders and feeling really good, and it can't last forever. That's the human condition. You have to have bad days to have those days of full alignment. But that's what you're always chasing, is that sense of like, for me, it's when I'm like working out every morning. I'm doing the cold plunge thing as like a nervous system regulation. I'm probably doing some meditation a couple times a week, and I'm just like showing up and putting in the legwork in the DAW, in the music. That's like really when things feel in alignment, and I'm performing like somewhat regularly. That's when things like feel in full alignment for me. But it's different for every person, and of course, like I'm a very relational person too. So if I'm just not getting out the house, it makes a big impact. But one other thing I wanted to just toss out there that you sort of alluded to was the notion of like the insignificance of Earth in this galaxy is like undeniable, given how our scientific discoveries,
especially as we're learning more and more about it. It's insane how big the universe is.
Totally. And I think like in the scope of that, you're so right in saying like the time is so limited. You're like a speck in the whole time span here, and you really just got to enjoy it and like appreciate the ups and downs and like learn to embrace those. And the final thing I wanted to end on here, which is something I just recently picked up from a podcast, but they charted out like something like 500 human emotions, on a spectrum of past, present, and future. And they found that the vast majority of negative emotions fell into the past and the future, and the vast majority of positive emotions fell into the present.
Into the
And it
present.
was just
I mean,
like,
that's just
damn.
like, it's so it's intuitive to me. Or not, that's not the word. It's like, it's obvious to me that that's the thing. It's like, I just saw, I don't know, it wasn't a podcast, it was like a Kurtz Kazat video, you know, Kurtz Kazat, that animated thing.
I love their stuff.
They just, it was like, it was something about, like focusing on the present and the time, like right now is like healthier, and like, you know, all the things in the past and the present are like, oh, what was it? It was so good. Totally. I mean, that's just like, it's so obvious. Like, and you know, like, where do you learn it the most? When you're at a party and you're dancing, you don't think about anything. You're on some like great MD. You don't think about anything. You're just like, the music's rocking. Your best friends are there. You know, you're dancing. You have so much energy. It's like beautiful daytime. And like, you're just, your job doesn't matter. What's going to happen after the party doesn't matter. The fight that you had with your girlfriend doesn't matter. It's like, nothing matters. All that matters is like this few 20 minutes, 5 minutes of just like, yeah. Like, you know, and then you get like, it compounds. The more you like focus on like that exact moment, the longer you stay in it. And like, it's like, when you think about it, like, oh, those moments are so obviously like the best moments. I'll add just, we're gonna add lots of last things here, but like, you know, a ceremony, like a plant medicine ceremony is kind of like, that's a lot of teaching in that, of like the moment of like, when you leave here, you can always remember the altar of this ceremony, because that's going to bring you back to that moment that you were in, that moment of like nothing past, present, whatever. And I think that that's like so important. Like psychedelics in general, I think, are very good at that. The time dilation thing is very important to kind of just like being in the moment.
And the other thing I'll add to that is, for me, I
please.
I've experimented with some psychedelics. I don't use them often, but I do find that I achieve the same level of like plasticity, feeling, and excitement in my brain in having these types of philosophical conversations with a person such as you, that's like open-minded and willing to share perspectives and things like that. Like, I get just as jazzed off of that and the notion of returning to that state and that feeling, as I do maybe with like more like chemical alteration that's like more intentional.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, what are we're altering our chemical right now by talking to each other and like being open-minded and hearing different opinions and hearing different expressions to things. Like, it's literally firing all these things in your brain and releasing all these chemicals that maybe in somehow relate to like what a psychedelic experience is doing, or like what a flow, like, what is a flow state? It's literally like, I mean, I don't know, literally, I don't know about the chemicals, but like, it's
again, the dorsolateral, dude, deregulation of that. You're not thinking, I'm here, I'm sounding so good on my, I'm looking, these visuals are looking
I should have
so
just kept
good.
that going. I should have kept that going. I shouldn't have stopped myself. But yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, the flow state is that chemical, you know, you're heightened, like, it's like kind of like when I imagine like what hunting, like, you know, with a spear, or like hunting in the forest, you have to be present, right, to be able to hit the animal or not be eaten by the animal. And that's like a heightened state of consciousness, right? Meditation is the same thing. Or like, you know, again, like dancing at a party, playing, performing, or like, you know, even like extreme sports, you know, like not extreme, but like snowboarding or like skateboarding. You have to be.
Those are some of the biggest dopamine hits, dude. Wingsuit flying doesn't get more dopamine than that, man.
So it's like, and I think that like those chemical, you know, it's different ways to get to it, right? But I think it's there. I found the thing, by the way, I just want to show you quickly because I think it's really cool.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's called Rajas. Have you heard of this concept of Raja?
Ragas.
Ragas? Okay, I'm not pronouncing it properly.
Yeah,
totally. So they do relate to like the different chakras, or like the different colors of the chakras, and like the different states of the you know, here notations, blah blah. 7 degrees, right? 7 chakras, 7 days of the week, and then you know, 7 portions of the day. I think is like kind of the way that they do it in the Hinduism. And then and I don't know, like, I don't know how to read this or anything, but does this read to you as something?
Not anything to me immediately off the that because I haven't studied too much of it honestly,
Okay.
but yeah, well, yes, but it looks way more technical.
It's wild, right?
Yeah, I will say Eastern approach to music is at least specifically Indian has such an emphasis on it has such an emphasis on rhythm over melody and harmony. Western music is so oriented on melody. Oh yeah, yeah, dude, I love that shit. I ate that up in school when I got it taught to me. But yeah, it's that world is just it's a totally different framework to view music in, and it's much more rhythmically driven in the way that we have modes in harmony. Like I was showing you the bright mode with the Simpsons song and darker modes. They think about that as rhythmic modes almost. They'll play a melody. They'll play like row 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 your boat gently, and then they'll say like, okay, now do that in like triplets. It's like row 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 your boat gently down the stream versus row 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 your boat gently down the stream, directly in line with the hands. They'll shift melodies into different rhythmic like stretches that still align mathematically, and that is their way of like playing a song in a different key.
Wow.
As you would in a jazz jam. So it's a completely different way of thinking about musical organization.
So cool.
Which
I
really
love.
loved.
Yeah, I just I get excited when I talk to people like you, because it's like, the music is so fascinating, and like kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of like, I understand it on like a I don't understand it on an intellectual level, but I understand it on like a what it feels like, resonance, and like the way different musics make me feel. And I'm a type of person that just really love to I love to understand things more intellectually. I'll never be an intellectual or like a scientist, but I like to that's why I like to like watch scientific videos and things like that, because it kind of brings things down to a way that I can understand it. And talking to people like you who are very smart in a scientific level, you have like a degree in neuroscience, but you can express it to me in like a way that I can understand it. It just like deepens enriches my experience in this world. So thank you for talking to me and for sharing with us your process and the way that you approach things. And this was such a nice and like fresh conversation for the podcast. So I really, really appreciate it. Anything you want to?
Thank you for having me on, and like this was. I was honored that someone who runs a visual podcast just hit me up to be on it. It was pretty cool. I was like, wow, I don't first and foremost identify as a visual artist, but that's cool that it's meeting the standards of this podcast.
There are no standards. Well, there are standards, and you met them. You.
Thank you.
No, is there anything you want to share with us or plug or say before we go?
I guess just in relation, maybe two things. Just in relation to what you were speaking about with the resembling of like scientific qualities of music in a more like visual way. I made this thing, and I should have shown you it at some point, but it's called the Harmelody MIDI visualizer, and depending on the chord that you're playing over with a level of tension and release in the chord, an animation for each note that flies across the screen is different. So if it's a minor chord and it's really like resonant and round and smooth sounding, it's like fluid and particles. And then if it's like dissonant and harsh, it has these more like distorted, glitchy animations for the notes as they fly across. So I've done experimentations with trying to resemble that consonance and dissonance
Super cool.
with different note visualizers. But the last thing I guess to end on is I guess
wait, just
yeah.
Did you get any like feedback from that, or did you have any like results
a lot
from
of
that?
people, I wanted people to comment a song that they wanted to see visualized, because you sort of predetermine the harmony of the song, and then you play the notes and the contour of the melody. It was supposed to reflect the contour of the melody of the notes, whether it's going up or down, and then horizontally the animation reflects the level of tension or release in that given moment in the song. So
Interesting.
yeah, I posted a few things with it. I've used it to demonstrate. It's really good for jazz musicians and conferences when I go to present on music and visuals. For jazz conferences specifically, I'm like, this is diminished, this is pentatonic, this is like, when I'm soloing, I have all the note heads reflecting and flying out of the vibraphone depending on what I'm playing.
That's
and
cool.
people like love that more like analytical music theory approach to it.
Right.
I haven't used it too much in shows just because I find that full visuals that are abstract are much more like immersive and reflective of those things than like these really like scientific, calculated individual notes. But that could be something cool to do more real time as we do more real time with the show. Last thing I was going to say, though, is just that in relation to the visual community, I wanted to just give a massive shout out in general to the visual community for really inspiring me to continue like developing my artistry and being so open with sharing everything. And in that sense, I've felt compelled to want to give back to that community. And I'm going to be in the new year, I think in January, uploading, maybe even by the end of the year, uploading like a ton of 3D models for like crazy cheap that I've just like built or found in my time. And also the TD Ableton patches that I made for a lot of visualizing my music for festivals and stuff. They're
Hell
just
yeah.
going to be like up and like super affordable, if not free, for people
Where
to
are you
grab.
gonna release it?
Probably on a Patreon or mostly starting on my website. I think with a Patreon, I really want to have a sense of being regular with it, which I don't
Yes.
have in my workflow because
That's
I'm
important, for
focusing
sure.
on music first being regular, and then all the downstream stuff can come from that. But for now, I think it'll just be web store. Like plexusplay.com is my website. You can find
Awesome.
announcements about shows.
Well,
and
we'll
everything
definitely
else.
add those links, you know, like as they come out. And yeah, I mean, thank you again for. It's really awesome that you're going to share those and make them available. And thank you, Matt. It was lovely talking to you.
Of
I really
course.
like you,
Yeah.
and I hope we get to see each other in the physical space soon.
Yeah, dude, you were talking about having me come out there maybe to some nature or let me know
Anytime.
the next time you're in this city. I would love to just have you over for some tea or something.
Hell yeah. Wow. What an episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Madness Smash for the intro and outro music. Thank you to Sophie Holder for the amazing internship helping us with all the episodes. And thank you to the guests for coming on and spending time with us.